A stranger's last stand. When mercy becomes the most dangerous choice, blood stained the frozen ground. Leora Vance had nowhere left to run, not from the mob surrounding her, not from the secrets she carried, not from the violence closing in. In a town where strangers meant danger and difference meant death, she made her stand. One woman, dozens of enemies, and the choice to stop running. If you want to see how one act of courage changed two lives forever, watch until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. The wind cut through Coldwater Ridge like a blade through flesh. Leora Vance felt it slice across her face as she stumbled down the main thoroughfare, each step a negotiation between willpower and the body's brutal honesty about its limits. Her left side was soaked through, not with snow, though plenty of that clung to her coat, but with something darker, something that steamed faintly in the frigid air before freezing into her clothes. Blood. Her blood. The frontier town materialized around her like a fever dream. Buildings leaned into each other as if for warmth, their wood plank faces weathered gray by wind and neglect. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin, desperate threads. Windows were shuttered against the cold, against the world, against people like her. She'd planned to pass through. That was always the plan. Walk the perimeter, avoid the center, get supplies if possible, and disappear before anyone looked too closely. But the injury had changed everything. The fall from her horse 3 miles back had torn something essential inside her, and now each breath felt like drowning. Just keep moving. Another hour. Find shelter past town. Don't stop. But her body had other ideas. Leora's vision swam. The street tilted, and she caught herself against a hitching post, her gloved hand leaving a dark smear. She blinked hard, trying to focus, and that's when she realized the street had gone quiet. Too quiet. She looked up. They were watching her. A woman in a faded blue dress stood frozen in a doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth. 2 men outside the general store had stopped mid-conversation, their eyes locked on Leora with the kind of focus usually reserved for predators sizing up prey. A child peered around his mother's skirts, his small face curious, until the mother yanked him back inside, slamming the door. Leora's stomach dropped. She knew that look. She'd seen it in a dozen towns before Coldwater Ridge, in 100 suspicious faces that saw her dark skin, her foreign features, her refusal to explain herself, and decided she was dangerous. "You're bleeding," the voice came from her left. A man in a leather apron, the blacksmith probably, stood with his hammer still raised from whatever he'd been working on. He wasn't asking. He was accusing. "I'm fine," Leora said, though her voice came out thinner than she'd intended. "Just passing through." "That's not our blood, is it?" Another voice, this one from the general store. The older of the 2 men stepped forward, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "What happened out there?" "Nothing that concerns you." Leora pushed away from the hitching post, trying to stand straight despite the fire spreading through her side. "I'll be gone before nightfall." "Like hell you will." A third voice now, younger, angrier. A ranch hand by the look of him, all coiled muscle and barely restrained violence. "We don't know you. Don't know where you came from. Don't know what you did to get yourself hurt like that." "I didn't do anything. That's what they always say." The blacksmith lowered his hammer but didn't put it down. "Right before people start dying." Leora's hand instinctively moved toward the knife at her belt, but she forced herself to stop. Drawing a weapon now would be suicide. They were looking for an excuse, any excuse, to justify what they already wanted to do. "I'm not a threat," she said carefully. "I don't want trouble." "Then you shouldn't have come here." More people were emerging now, drawn by the commotion like wolves to the scent of blood. Leora counted them without seeming to. 8, 10, 15. A crowd was forming, and crowds had their own terrible momentum. "Check her pack," someone called out. "See what she's carrying." Could be stolen goods. Could be plague. Could be one of them raiders we heard about. "I'm not a raider." Leora's voice came out harder than she'd intended, and she saw several people flinch. Wrong move. Fear was turning into anger, and anger into action. "I'm just trying to survive, same as you." "Not the same," the blacksmith said. "We built this town. We protect each other. You're nothing but a stranger with blood on her clothes and secrets in her eyes." The crowd pressed closer. Leora felt the world narrowing, options evaporating like breath in the cold air. Run, and they'd chase her, probably shoot her in the back, stand and fight, and she'd die right here in the street. Surrender, and they'd hang her anyway, slowly, after they'd convinced themselves she deserved it. There's always a choice, she thought bitterly. It's just never a good one. We should take her to the sheriff, someone suggested, but the blacksmith shook his head. Sheriff's 3 days away in Silver Falls. She could be diseased, could be dangerous. We take care of our own problems here. Meaning what exactly? Leora asked, though she already knew the answer. The blacksmith met her eyes. Meaning you're not welcome. Meaning you leave or we make you leave. I'm trying to leave, not fast enough. A rock struck her shoulder. Leora staggered, and the crowd surged forward like water through a broken dam. Hands grabbed at her pack, her arms, her coat. She twisted away, but there were too many of them, and her body was already failing. Get off me! She shoved hard, and someone yelped, and suddenly the mood shifted from fearful to furious. She's fighting back! Knew she was dangerous. Grab her! Leora's hand found her knife. She didn't draw it. Wouldn't give them that satisfaction, that justification. But her fingers wrapped around the handle as boots kicked at her legs and fists hammered her back. She dropped to one knee, then both, curling inward to protect her injured side. This is how it ends, she thought with a strange, distant clarity. Beaten to death by frightened people in a town whose name I'll never remember. The blows kept coming. Someone kicked her ribs. Someone else grabbed her hair. She tasted blood. Couldn't tell if it was from her original injury or something new. The world was a chaos of boots and shouts, and the peculiar helplessness of knowing you're about to die and being unable to stop it. Then, suddenly, the blows stopped. Enough! The voice cut through the noise like a whip crack, deep, rough, absolutely certain, the kind of voice that expected to be obeyed and usually was. Leora looked up through swelling eyes and saw him. He stood between her and the crowd, a wall of a man in a heavy coat, dark hair shot through with gray, face carved into hard lines by weather and time. He wasn't pointing a weapon at anyone, wasn't even particularly aggressive in his stance. He was just there, immovable, inevitable. Rowan, the blacksmith said, and there was something in his voice, not quite respect, not quite fear. This doesn't concern you. I'm making it my concern. The man, Rowan, didn't look at Leora, kept his attention fixed on the crowd. You've had your fun. Now back off. She's dangerous, the ranch hand insisted. Could be anyone, could be bleeding to death in the street while you lot work yourselves into a killing mood. Rowan's voice didn't rise, but it somehow got harder. That what you want? Want to explain to your children how you beat an unarmed woman to death because you were scared? We weren't going to kill her, someone protested, but the words rang hollow. No? Rowan finally turned, and Leora saw his eyes, gray as winter storms, just as cold. Then what were you doing? Silence. The crowd shifted, suddenly uncertain, individual faces emerging from the mob mentality. A woman who looked ashamed. A young man who couldn't meet Rowan's gaze. The blacksmith still defiant but no longer sure of his ground. Thought so. Rowan crouched beside Leora, and she flinched despite herself. Can you stand? She wanted to say yes, wanted to spit in his face and tell him she didn't need his help, didn't need anyone's help. But her body betrayed her, trembling with shock and blood loss in the aftermath of violence. I don't know, she whispered. Then I'll help. He moved carefully, telegraphing every motion, and slid an arm under her shoulders. This is going to hurt. It did. Leora bit back a scream as he lifted her, every muscle in her side screaming protest. But he was strong and steady, and he didn't let go when she sagged against him. Rowan, you can't, the blacksmith started, but Rowan cut him off with a look. Can't what? Help someone who needs it? Pretty sure I can do whatever I damn well please on my own land, Garrett. She's not on your land, she's on our street. Then I'm taking her off your street. Rowan adjusted his grip, taking more of Leora's weight. Unless you want to try stopping me. The challenge hung in the air. Leora felt the crowd calculating, weighing their fear of her against their wariness of this man who'd stepped in. She didn't understand it, didn't understand why they'd hesitate, why this stranger's word carried weight, but they did hesitate. And in that hesitation, Rowan moved. He half carried, half dragged Leora down the street, away from the crowd, away from the violence. She tried to help, tried to make her legs work, but they'd gone rubbery and weak. All she could do was lean on him and try not to pass out. "Why?" she managed to gasp out. "Why help me? Save your breath. Got a ways to go yet. They'll come after you. Let them try." They passed the last building and the town fell away behind them. Ahead, pine forest rose like a wall, dark and deep. Rowan angled toward a trail Leora hadn't noticed, barely visible under the snow. "My cabin's an hour's walk," he said. "Can you make it?" "Do I have a choice?" "Always got a choice, just not always a good one." Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the sheer absurdity of being rescued by a stranger who had every reason to leave her to die, Leora almost laughed. Because he was right. She'd learned that lesson 100 times over. You always had a choice. It just rarely mattered. They walked. Or Rowan walked, and Leora stumbled along beside him, held upright more by his strength than her own. The forest closed around them, muffling sound, transforming the world into something primal and simple. Cold, trees, breath, blood. "What's your name?" Rowan asked after a while. "Leora." She hesitated, then added, "Leora Vance." "Rowan Hale." "I know," they said. "What else did they say?" "Nothing, I believed." She glanced at him sideways, trying to read his face, but it gave away nothing. "Why'd you help me, Rowan Hale?" "Because nobody else did." It was such a simple answer, so simple it should have been stupid. But something in the way he said it, flat, matter-of-fact, like it was the only answer that made sense, made Leora's throat tighten. "That's not a reason. It's the only reason that matters." They fell silent again. Leora focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on breathing through the pain, on not thinking about what came next. Because what came next was uncertain, dangerous, potentially worse than what she'd just escaped. She'd survived the mob. But this man who'd saved her was still a stranger, still an unknown. And in Leora's experience, the unknown was usually just another flavor of danger. After what felt like hours but was probably less than one, the cabin appeared. It was small, sturdy, built from logs weathered to the color of old bone. Smoke rose from a stone chimney. A lean-to sheltered a stack of firewood that looked like it could last through 3 winters. Everything about it spoke of isolation, self-sufficiency, a life carved out through hard work and harder choices. Rowan kicked the door open and guided Leora inside. The warmth hit her like a fist. She'd been cold for so long she'd stopped noticing, but now the heat from the fire, yes, there was a fire, crackling in a hearth built from river stones, made her skin prickle and burn. "Sit," Rowan said, steering her toward a chair by the fire. "Don't move." Leora sat because her legs wouldn't hold her any longer. She watched through hazy eyes as Rowan moved around the cabin with the efficiency of long practice, stoking the fire, setting a kettle to boil, pulling down jars and bottles from rough wooden shelves. "How bad is it?" he asked without looking at her. "Bad enough." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." He turned then, and for the first time she saw something like a smile ghost across his face. It was gone before she could be sure, but it changed something in the air between them. "We're going to have to look at it," he said. "The wound. Can't help you if I don't know what I'm dealing with." Every instinct Leora had screamed at her to refuse. She didn't know this man, didn't owe him anything, didn't trust him, couldn't trust him, shouldn't trust anyone. But she was dying. That was just a fact. The blood loss, the cold, the injury itself. Something vital had torn when she fell, and without help, she'd be dead before morning. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Okay." Rowan nodded once, sharp and businesslike. "Coat off first, then the shirt. I'll heat water for cleaning." Leora fumbled with her coat buttons, but her fingers were clumsy with cold and shock. After a moment, Rowan crossed to her and gently moved her hands aside. "Let me." She wanted to protest. Instead, she sat rigid as stone while the stranger undid her coat, peeled it away from her shoulders, revealing the shirt beneath, once white, now soaked through with crimson and rust brown. "Christ," Rowan muttered. "What did you fall on? A knife?" "A rock. Sharp one. Lucky it didn't gut you." "Doesn't feel lucky." He made a sound that might have been agreement and helped her ease the shirt over her head. Leora kept her eyes fixed on the fire, refusing to look down, refusing to see how bad it was. Bad enough that she could feel blood running warm down her side. Bad enough that the room was starting to tilt again. "Stay with me," Rowan said sharply. "Don't you dare pass out yet." "Wasn't planning on it." "Good, because this is going to hurt like hell, and I need you conscious to tell me if I'm making it worse." He wasn't lying. When he pressed a cloth soaked in something that smelled like fire and medicine against the wound, Leora's vision went white. She heard herself gasp, felt her hands clench on the chair arms hard enough to make the wood creak. "Breathe," Rowan ordered. "In and out. Focus on that." "Easy for you to say," Leora gritted out between clenched teeth. "Never said it was easy. Said it was necessary." He worked in silence after that, cleaning the wound with methodical care. Leora focused on breathing, on the fire, on anything but the pain. She counted the logs in the walls, 23 visible from where she sat, counted the bottles on the shelves, 15, maybe 16. Counted Rowan's breaths steady and even, a counterpoint to her own ragged gasps. "It's deep," he said finally, "but clean. No signs of infection yet, though that could change. I can stitch it, but you'll need rest. Real rest, not just a night's sleep." "How long?" "Week at least. Maybe 2. Leora's head snapped toward him. "I can't stay here 2 weeks. You don't have a choice." "I always have a choice." Rowan met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something other than cold calculation there, something almost like understanding. "You could leave," he said quietly, "probably make it half a mile before you collapse. Die in the snow, alone, and nobody'd find you till spring thaw." He paused. "Or you could stay. Let me help. Live long enough to regret it if you want." "Why would you do that? You don't know me." "No," he agreed. "I don't. I could be dangerous, like they said." "Could be. Probably are. In your own way." He turned back to his medical supplies, selecting a needle and thread. "But right now you're just hurt. And I don't let people die on my watch if I can help it. Even strangers? Especially strangers. They're the ones who need it most." It was the second time he'd said something that should have been simple, but landed with unexpected weight. Leora studied his face, trying to understand what kind of man pulled a bloodied stranger from a mob, brought her to his home, tended her wounds without asking for explanations. A fool, probably. Or someone with his own demons. Maybe both. "This is going to hurt worse than the cleaning," Rowan warned, threading the needle. "You want something to bite on? I'll manage." Stubborn, alive. That ghost of a smile again, there and gone. "Fair point." The first stitch felt like he was sewing her soul to her body. Leora's vision blurred and she tasted copper. But she didn't cry out, wouldn't give him the satisfaction, wouldn't show weakness to someone who'd already seen too much. Rowan worked quickly, his hands steady despite the delicate work. Leora counted stitches instead of breathing. 1, 2, 5, 10. Each one a small agony, each one binding her to this moment, this place, this stranger who'd chosen to help when the entire town had chosen violence. "Done," Rowan said at last, tying off the thread. 12 stitches. Keep it clean, keep it dry, and maybe you'll keep the arm." "The arm?" "Infection spreads. Seen men lose limbs to wounds smaller than this." Leora looked down at herself for the first time. The wound ran from just below her ribs to her hip, an angry red line punctuated by neat black stitches. It should have looked worse than it did. Should have looked fatal. Maybe it still was. "Thank you," she said, and was surprised to find she meant it. Rowan shrugged, already moving away to wash his hands. "Don't thank me yet. Hard part's still coming." "Harder than almost dying in the street?" "Surviving's always harder than dying. Dying just takes a minute. Surviving takes everything you've got. Every day, for as long as you can manage it." He dried his hands on a cloth, hung it precisely on a hook by the door. "You'll sleep in the bed. I'll take the floor." "I'm not taking your bed." "Yes, you are. You need the rest, and I need you healthy enough to leave when the time comes." His voice was matter-of-fact, brooking no argument. "This isn't charity, it's practicality." What if I don't want to be practical? Then you picked the wrong place to collapse. Despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the sheer strangeness of the situation, Leora felt something like a laugh bubble up. It came out as more of a cough, but Rowan seemed to understand. "Get some sleep," he said, gentler now. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." He helped her to the bed, a simple frame built into the wall with a mattress that smelled like pine and wood smoke. Leora sank into it and felt her body finally begin to relax. The warmth of the cabin, the security of walls and a door, the simple fact of being horizontal, it all combined to drag her down toward unconsciousness. But before the darkness took her, she managed one more question. "Rowan?" "Yeah?" "Why don't they like you, the townspeople?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then from somewhere near the fire, "Because I remind them of what they could be if they weren't so damn scared all the time." "And what's that?" "Alone." Leora wanted to ask more, wanted to understand this contradiction of a man who lived in isolation but stepped into crowds to save strangers. But sleep was pulling at her with gentle, insistent hands, and she was too tired to fight it. She let herself fall. When Leora woke, gray light filtered through a small window, and the fire had burned down to embers. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then her side flared with pain, and memory came flooding back. The mob, the violence, the stranger with storm-colored eyes. Rowan. She turned her head carefully and found him sitting in the chair she'd occupied last night, a rifle across his lap, facing the door. He wasn't sleeping. His eyes were open, alert, watching, guarding. "Morning," he said without looking at her. "How's the pain?" "Manageable." "Liar." This time the laugh didn't hurt quite so much. "Yeah." Rowan stood, setting the rifle within easy reach but not threatening. He moved to the hearth and stirred the embers back to life, adding wood with the same precision he'd shown stitching her wound. "There's food if you can eat. Broth, mostly, and water. Clean water, not snowmelt." "You stay up all night?" Leora asked, struggling to sit up. "Someone had to." "In case I tried to kill you in your sleep?" "In case they came from town." The words settled heavy in the air. Leora hadn't considered that, too focused on her own survival, her own pain. But of course there'd be consequences for what Rowan had done. Of course the town wouldn't just forget. "They won't," she said, hoping it was true. "They were scared, but they're not stupid. They won't come after you." "Maybe." Rowan poured water from a pitcher into a cup, brought it to her. "Maybe not, but I don't take chances with maybes." Leora accepted the cup with both hands, surprised by how much they shook. The water tasted like snow and stone, cold and clean. She drank it all. "You should have left me," she said. "Would have been safer for you." "Probably." "So why didn't you?" Rowan took the empty cup, refilled it, handed it back. "Already told you." "Because nobody else did." "That's not a real answer." "It's the only one I've got." They stared at each other across the small cabin, and Leora felt something shift, not trust, that would take more than one night and some stitches, but maybe the possibility of trust. The first small crack in the armor she'd built around herself. "I won't stay long," she said. "Soon as I can walk, I'll be gone." "We'll see." "I mean it." "So do I." Rowan turned back to the fire, and Leora watched him move around the cabin, efficient and self-contained. Everything about him suggested a man who'd made peace with solitude, who'd chosen isolation not out of fear but out of something else, something Leora thought she might recognize if she let herself look close enough. But she wouldn't, couldn't, because looking close meant caring, and caring meant weakness, and weakness got you killed. She'd learned that lesson too well to forget it now. Still, as the morning light grew stronger and Rowan prepared food without fuss or conversation, Leora felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not gratitude, she knew what that felt like, and this was different. Stranger. It felt almost like hope, and that, more than the wound or the pain or the memory of the mob, scared her more than anything else, because hope was the most dangerous thing of all. Hope made you stay when you should run, made you trust when you should suspect, made you believe that maybe, just maybe, the world could be something other than brutal and unforgiving. Leora had given up hope years ago. but lying in a stranger's bed, in a cabin at the edge of the world, with stitches holding her together, and a man who'd saved her life standing guard by the fire, maybe she'd been wrong to give up so easily. Maybe. The days that followed developed their own strange rhythm, built not on words, but on the small, necessary tasks that kept two people alive in an unforgiving land. Leora woke on the second morning to find Rowan already gone. The rifle was missing from its place by the door, and fresh wood sat stacked beside the fire. A pot of something that smelled like herbs and meat hung over the embers, steam rising in lazy spirals. On the table, someone had left bread, hard, dark bread that looked days old but was still edible, and a jar of what might have been preserves. She sat up slowly, testing her body's limits. The wound pulled and burned, but the blinding pain from yesterday had dulled to something manageable. She could breathe without feeling like her ribs were tearing apart. That was progress. The cabin was quiet in a way that felt alive rather than empty. Outside the window, snow fell in thick, lazy flakes that turned the world into something soft and muffled. Leora watched it for a while, letting her mind drift, not thinking about yesterday or tomorrow or anything beyond this moment. The door opened without warning. Leora's hand moved instinctively toward the knife she no longer had, lost somewhere in the chaos of the mob. But it was only Rowan, snow dusting his shoulders and a brace of rabbits hanging from his belt. "You're awake," he said, stomping snow from his boots. "Good. Thought you might sleep through to spring." "How long was I out?" "Day and a half, give or take." He hung the rabbits from a hook near the door and shrugged out of his coat. "Your body needed it. Healing takes energy." Leora swung her legs over the side of the bed, fighting a wave of dizziness. "I should help. You should sit down before you fall down." Rowan's voice wasn't unkind, but it left no room for argument. "You're healing, not healed. Big difference." "I can't just lie here while you do everything." "Why not? I've been doing everything alone for 3 years. 1 more week won't kill me." He moved to the hearth, checked the pot. "Besides, you try to help right now, you'll tear those stitches. Then I'll have to sew you back together, and we'll both be annoyed about it." Despite herself, Leora felt her lips twitch. "You're very practical." "Practicality keeps you alive out here. Sentiment gets you frozen or starved or dead." He ladled broth into a wooden bowl, brought it to her. "Eat. All of it. You've lost too much blood to be picky." The broth was good. Better than good, actually. Rich and savory, with something herbaceous underneath that she couldn't quite place. Leora ate slowly, aware of Rowan's eyes on her, assessing. "You cook like this often?" she asked between spoonfuls. "Often enough. Food's fuel. No point making it taste bad if you don't have to." "Most men I've known couldn't cook to save their lives." "Most men you've known probably had women to do it for them." Rowan pulled out his hunting knife and began skinning the rabbits with quick, efficient movements. "Out here, you learn fast or you die. Simple as that." Leora watched him work, fascinated despite herself by the casual competence in every motion. No wasted movement, no hesitation. He'd done this 1,000 times, and it showed. "How long have you lived out here?" she asked. 3 years. Said so already. Alone the whole time? His hands paused for just a fraction of a second. "Yeah. That's a long time to be alone." "It's a long time to be anything." He finished the first rabbit and started on the second. "You ask a lot of questions for someone who won't answer any." Leora set down her empty bowl. "What do you want to know?" "Nothing you don't want to tell me." The answer surprised her. Most people pushed when they sensed secrets, pried and prodded until they got what they wanted, or you gave up and left. But Rowan just kept working, apparently unbothered by the gaps in her story. "I don't understand you," Leora said finally. "Don't need to understand me. Just need to heal up so you can move on." "Is that what you want? For me to move on?" Rowan looked up then, meeting her eyes with that storm-gray gaze. "What I want doesn't matter. What matters is you've got somewhere to be, and I'm not the kind of complication you need." "You saved my life." "And you'll repay it by not dying in my cabin. Fair trade." He went back to his work. "Eat the bread too. You need the strength." Leora wanted to push back, wanted to demand real answers to the questions circling in her head like wolves around a campfire. But exhaustion was pulling at her again, and the broth sat warm in her belly, and maybe Rowan was right. Maybe understanding didn't matter. Maybe survival was enough. She ate the bread. The third day, Rowan let her sit by the fire while he worked on repairing a trap that had broken. She watched his hands move, threading new wire through wooden frames, his fingers surprisingly nimble for their size. "You could teach me," she said. He glanced up. "Teach you what?" "How to set traps. How to survive out here." "Why? You're leaving soon as you can walk." "Maybe, maybe not." The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. "I don't have anywhere to be." "Not really." Rowan set down the trap. "Everyone's got somewhere to be." "Not me. Haven't for a long time." Something shifted in his expression, too quick to name. "What happened?" Leora looked away into the fire. "Same thing that happens to everyone eventually. Lost people. Lost places. Lost the things that made staying worthwhile. And you've been running ever since." And it wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yeah." "Running from what?" "Does it matter?" "Might. If whoever's chasing you decides to come looking." Leora's blood went cold. She hadn't thought about that, hadn't let herself think about it, too focused on the immediate threat, the immediate pain. But Rowan was right. If they were still looking, if they'd tracked her this far. "Nobody's looking," she said, trying to make it true through force of will. "I made sure of that." "How?" "By being very, very careful and very, very lucky." She met his eyes. "Luck runs out, though. Always does." Rowan picked up the trap again, went back to his repairs. "Then maybe it's time to stop running. You make it sound easy." "Never said easy. Said time. There's a difference." They fell into silence again, but it felt different this time. Less wary, more considering. Leora pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might be like to stop. To stay in one place long enough to learn its rhythms, its seasons. To wake up knowing what the day would bring instead of constantly calculating the next escape route. It seemed impossible. Foreign. Dangerous in ways she couldn't quite articulate, but also, almost, appealing. "Why'd you come to Coldwater Ridge?" Rowan asked, breaking into her thoughts. "Needed supplies. Thought I could slip through without being noticed. Bad plan." "Clearly. Where were you headed after?" Leora shrugged. "North, maybe west, somewhere cold enough that people don't ask questions. Plenty of places like that. Most of them will get you killed just as fast as that mob would have." "I'm hard to kill." "Everyone's hard to kill until they're dead." He tied off the wire, tested the trap's spring mechanism. "You ever think about settling somewhere? Actually staying?" "No point. Staying means connections, and connections mean weakness." "Or strength," Leora laughed, sharp and bitter. "You live alone in the woods, and you're going to lecture me about connections?" "Never said I was smart. Just said I was alive." Rowan set the finished trap aside. "And yeah, I'm alone. But that's a choice I made, not something that happened to me. Big difference." "What's the difference?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire like it held answers. "Choice means you can unmake it. Circumstance just is." "You thinking about unmaking yours?" "No. But I could if I wanted. That matters." Leora turned that over in her mind, examining it from different angles. She'd spent so long thinking of her isolation as inevitable, necessary, the only way to survive. But Rowan was right. There was a difference between running because you had to and running because you'd forgotten you could stop. "I wouldn't know how," she admitted quietly. "How to stop? How to stay?" "Neither would I, but I figure you learn the same way you learn everything else." He stood, stretched, the movement easy despite his size. "One day at a time, trying not to die." "That's your philosophy? Kept me alive so far?" Fair point, Leora thought. The fourth day, she made it to the door. It was a small victory, pathetic really, but it felt monumental. Her legs shook with the effort, and her side screamed protest, but she crossed the 10 feet from bed to doorway under her own power. Rowan found her there, leaning against the frame, staring out at a world transformed by fresh snow. "Feeling ambitious?" he asked. "Feeling like I'm going to lose my mind if I stay in bed another minute." "Know the feeling." He moved past her, heading for the woodpile. "Don't overdo it, though. Healing's not a race." says the man who probably never sat still a day in his life. That's different. How? I wasn't half gutted by a sharp rock. Leora watched him work, splitting logs with an axe that looked older than both of them. Each swing was controlled, precise, the kind of efficiency that came from years of practice. The wood split clean, falling into neat pieces that he stacked with the same methodical care. You ever get lonely? The question came out before she could stop it. Rowan paused mid-swing. Sometimes. What do you do about it? Nothing. Wait for it to pass. He brought the axe down, and another log split perfectly. Loneliness doesn't kill you, just makes you uncomfortable for a while. I think it can kill you, just slowly. Maybe. But I'd rather die slow from loneliness than fast from trusting the wrong person. His words hit closer to home than Leora wanted to admit. She'd made the same calculation a dozen times, weighed the same risks. Better alone than betrayed? Better isolated than destroyed. But standing in Rowan's doorway, watching him work, she wondered if they'd both gotten the equation wrong. Can I help? She asked. No. I'm serious. So am I. You're healing. I'm working. That's how this arrangement works. It's a terrible arrangement. I feel useless. Rowan stopped, set down the axe, and turned to face her fully. You're not useless. You're injured. There's a difference, and you need to learn it before you hurt yourself trying to prove something that doesn't need proving. I need to pull my weight. You need to heal. That's all. His voice softened slightly. Look, I know you're not used to accepting help. I get that, but pride's a stupid reason to tear your stitches and set yourself back another week. Leora wanted to argue, wanted to push back against his certainty, but he was right, damn him. She could feel her body trembling with the effort of just standing, could feel the wound pulling with every breath. I hate this, she muttered. Yeah, most people do. Rowan picked up an armload of split wood. Come on, you can sit by the fire and tell me what you want for dinner. That's helping. That's not helping. That's just existing. Sometimes existing is enough. He guided her back inside, settled her in the chair with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rough exterior. Leora let him, too tired to fight, and hated how good it felt to be cared for, how dangerous that feeling was. Rabbit or venison? Rowan asked, moving to his stores. Surprise me. Dangerous words. I'm a dangerous woman. That ghost of a smile again. Starting to believe it. They fell into an easy rhythm after that. Rowan cooked while Leora sat by the fire, and for once, she didn't feel the need to fill the silence with conversation. It was enough to be warm, to be safe, to not be running. Just for now, she told herself. Just until you're healed. But part of her, a small, traitorous part she tried to ignore, wondered what it might be like to make just for now into something longer. The fifth day brought visitors. Leora heard them before Rowan did, her instincts honed by years of running, picking up the sound of horses through falling snow. She was on her feet before she realized it, hand reaching for a weapon she didn't have. Company, she said tersely. Rowan moved immediately. No questions, no hesitation. He grabbed his rifle, checked the load, positioned himself between Leora and the door. How many? He asked. 2, maybe 3. You sure? I'm sure. They waited in tense silence as the hoofbeats grew closer. Leora's heart hammered against her ribs, and she felt the wound pull as adrenaline flooded her system. This was it. They'd come for her. The town had decided she was too dangerous to let live, or worse, a knock. Polite, almost apologetic. Rowan and Leora exchanged glances. Rowan? A voice called from outside, male, unfamiliar to Leora. It's Marcus from the general store. Got a minute? Rowan's jaw tightened, but he lowered the rifle slightly. What do you want, Marcus? Just to talk. Promise we're not here for trouble. We being who? Me and William, that's it. 2 of us, unarmed, just wanting to talk. Rowan looked at Leora. She shook her head slightly, but he'd already made his decision. He opened the door, rifle still in hand, body blocking the entrance. 2 men stood in the snow, exactly as promised. The older one, Marcus, presumably, had his hands visible and empty. The younger one, barely out of his teens, looked nervous. Say your piece, Rowan said flatly. Marcus cleared his throat. wanted to apologize for the other day. Things got out of hand. That's putting it mildly. Yeah, it is. Marcus shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Look, we're not proud of what happened. Scared people do stupid things, and we let our fear turn into something ugly. You let your fear turn into attempted murder. I know, and there's no excuse for it. Marcus glanced past Rowan, trying to see into the cabin. Is the woman all right? Why do you care? Because if she's not, then we're worse than I thought, and I'm already not sleeping well. Rowan studied the two men for a long moment. Leora couldn't see his face, but she saw his shoulders tense, saw his grip tighten on the rifle. She's alive, he said finally. No thanks to you. Can I speak with her? Apologize directly? No. Rowan, please. I said no. You want to apologize? You've done it. Now leave. But William, the younger man, finally spoke up. We brought supplies, food, medicine, firewood. It's not much, but keep it. Please, it's the least we can do. The least you can do is leave us alone. Marcus nodded slowly. Understood. But Rowan, people are asking questions about her, about why you helped her, about whether what? Whether she's dangerous, whether you're in danger. Rowan's laugh was sharp and humorless. You're worried about me after you nearly beat an unarmed woman to death in the street? We're worried about everyone. If she's running from something, she's not your concern. If she brings trouble to Coldwater Ridge, then you'll deal with it the same way you deal with everything else, with fear and violence and mob mentality. Rowan stepped forward, and both men stepped back. Now get off my land before I forget I'm trying to be civilized. Marcus raised his hands in surrender. All right, we're going. But Rowan, if you need help, if things go wrong, I won't come to you, ever, for anything. The words hung in the cold air like a sentence. Marcus flinched, opened his mouth, then closed it again. He nodded once, sharply, and turned to go. Wait! Leora called from inside the cabin. Everyone froze. She stepped forward into Rowan's line of sight, ignoring his warning look. Leave the supplies, she said, not as an apology, as payment. Payment for what? Marcus asked. For your peace of mind. You want to know I'm not a threat? Fine, take my word. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm just passing through, and soon as I'm healed, I'll be gone. You'll never see me again. And if you're lying, Leora met his eyes steadily. Then Rowan knows where I sleep, and he's already proved he's not afraid to act when necessary. Your town's safe from me. I promise. Marcus studied her, weighing her words. Finally, he nodded. William, unload the supplies. Marcus, the younger man started, but Marcus cut him off. Do it. They worked quickly, piling bags and bundles near the cabin entrance. Rowan watched them with cold eyes, rifle never wavering. When they finished, Marcus looked at Leora one more time. I am sorry, he said, for what it's worth. It's worth exactly what it cost you to say it. Leora's voice was flat. Now go. They went. Rowan shut the door, set the rifle aside, and turned to face her. His expression was unreadable. That was stupid, he said. Probably. You just gave them your word you'd leave. I did. What if you don't want to leave? The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them was ready to examine. Then I'll deal with that when it comes, Leora said finally. But right now we have supplies we didn't have before, and they have the reassurance they needed. Everyone wins. Nobody wins in situations like this. They just lose different amounts. Then we lost less than they did. Rowan shook his head, but she saw approval in his eyes. You're dangerous in all the ways that matter. I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't one. But his tone suggested otherwise, and when he moved past her to examine the supplies, Leora caught the faintest hint of a real smile. Progress, she thought. That night, Rowan made stew from the supplies Marcus had brought. Venison, root vegetables, herbs that filled the cabin with rich, savory smells. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that came from spending days in close quarters with nothing but honesty between them. You meant what you said, Rowan observed finally. About leaving. I did when I said it. And now? Leora set down her bowl. Now I don't know. Is that allowed? Not knowing? In my experience, not knowing's the only honest answer to most questions. But it doesn't help much. No, it doesn't. She watched the firelight play across his face, highlighting the hard lines and hidden softnesses. Why'd you really help me, Rowan? And don't say because nobody else did. I want the truth. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I had a daughter once. The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. She'd be about your age now. Maybe a little younger. Hard to say. Time gets slippery when you're trying not to count it. He stared into the fire, his voice distant. Fever took her when she was 8. Took her mother too. Took everything that mattered and left me with nothing but questions about what I could have done different. Leora's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be. Wasn't your doing. He finally looked at her. But when I saw you in that street, saw them closing in, I don't know, something snapped, or maybe connected. Either way, I couldn't walk past. Because I reminded you of her? Because you were someone's daughter, someone's something, and nobody should die like that, alone and scared, surrounded by people too frightened to be decent. The raw honesty in his words broke something in Leora's carefully constructed walls. She felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me as more than a threat. Thank you for being worth saving. They sat together as the fire burned low, two damaged people finding unexpected comfort in shared silence. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. Inside, something fragile but real began to take root. Trust was too strong a word. But possibility? That felt right. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, survival didn't have to mean being alone. The possibility lasted exactly 6 more days. Leora was chopping vegetables, slowly, carefully, but doing it herself, when she heard the horses. Not 2 this time. Not a polite visit from guilt-ridden townspeople bearing supplies and apologies. Many horses. Moving fast. Her knife clattered to the table. Rowan was outside checking traps, too far to warn, too far to help. She moved to the window, peering through the gap in the shutters, and her blood turned to ice. 8 riders, maybe more, armed, moving with purpose toward the cabin. And at their head, a man she'd hoped never to see again. Cade Mercer. Leora's hands started shaking. She pressed them flat against the windowsill, forcing herself to breathe, to think. He'd found her. After 6 months of running, of covering her tracks, of being so careful, he'd found her. The door burst open and Rowan strode in, rifle already in hand. One look at her face told him everything he needed to know. How many? He asked, moving to the other window. 8? Maybe 10? Her voice sounded strange, distant. They're not from the town. I figured, who are they? People I ran from. What do they want? Leora met his eyes. Me. Dead, preferably. But they'll settle for taking me back. Rowan's jaw set in a hard line. That's not happening. You can't fight them all. Watch me. Rowan, listen. She crossed to him, grabbed his arm. This isn't your fight. If you give me to them, they'll leave. You'll be safe. Already told you, that's not happening. They'll kill you. Let them try. He checked his ammunition with practiced efficiency. How long before they get here? 2 minutes, maybe less. Leora's mind raced, calculating odds, angles, possibilities, all of them bad. There's still time for you to walk away. There was time 6 days ago, too. Didn't take it then, not taking it now. This is different. This is the same thing it's always been. People who think power gives them permission, and someone who needs to stand against it. Rowan moved to the door, positioning himself where he could see out but remain mostly covered. You know how to shoot? Yes. Good. There's a pistol in the chest by the bed. Load it, stay back, and don't hesitate if they get past me. Leora wanted to argue, wanted to scream at him that this was suicide, that saving her wasn't worth dying for. But the riders were close now, close enough that she could hear individual voices, and there was no more time for arguments. She found the pistol, checked the load, and took position near the back wall where she had a clear line to the door. Her hands had stopped shaking. Strange how that worked. Panic before action, calm during. She'd learned that lesson a long time ago. The horses stopped outside. Rowan, hail! The voice was Cade's, smooth and cultured and utterly devoid of warmth. "We're looking for someone. A woman. Dark hair, dark skin, injured. You seen anyone like that?" Rowan didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was flat, bored almost. "Lots of people pass through. You'll have to be more specific." "Don't play games. We tracked her here. Know she's in your cabin." "Tracking's not knowing. Could be you followed the wrong trail." "Could be, but I don't think so." A pause. "Her name's Leora Vance. She stole something from me. I want it back." Leora's stomach twisted. Not her, never her, despite what he claimed. He'd lost property, lost pride, lost the absolute control he thought he deserved. That's what he wanted back. "Don't know anyone by that name," Rowan said. "You're lying." "Prove it." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Leora could picture Cade's face, that cruel smile he got when he was enjoying someone else's discomfort. She'd seen it too many times. "I could burn you out," Cade said conversationally. "Smoke you out like rabbits and take what's mine from the ashes." "You could try." "You're 1 man against 10. Those aren't good odds." "Depends on how good a shot I am and how willing you are to find out." Rowan's voice dropped, went cold. "Maybe I take you first. Maybe your boys lose their taste for this once their leader's got a hole in him." Another pause. Leora heard horses shifting, men muttering. They hadn't expected resistance. People usually didn't resist Cade Mercer. They gave him what he wanted and hoped he'd leave them intact. "You don't know what you're protecting," Cade said. "She's a thief, a liar. Probably told you some sob story about being hunted, being innocent. Don't care what she is. She's under my roof, which makes her under my protection. Noble, stupid, but noble." Cade's voice hardened. "Last chance. Send her out and we'll leave peaceful. Keep her and we'll take her anyway, along with whatever's left of you." Rowan cocked his rifle, the sound sharp and final in the cold air. "Come and get her." Everything happened at once. The door exploded inward as someone kicked it. Rowan fired and a man screamed. Return fire shattered the window, wood splinters flying. Leora dropped low, tracking movement, waiting for a target. A man rushed through the broken door. Leora shot him twice, center mass, and he went down hard. Another followed, and Rowan's rifle barked again. The cabin filled with smoke and noise and the copper smell of blood. "Back door!" someone shouted from outside. Leora spun, but Rowan was already moving. He grabbed the small table and jammed it against the back entrance just as something heavy slammed into it from the other side. The wood held, barely. "They're flanking," Rowan said, his voice eerily calm. "Can't hold both doors." "Then we don't." Leora made a decision in half a heartbeat. "Give me the rifle." "What?" "Trust me. Give me the rifle and get to the back door." For one endless moment, Rowan hesitated. Then he thrust the weapon into her hands and moved toward the back of the cabin. Leora took his position at the front window, sighted down the barrel at the riders still mounted outside. She found Cade immediately. He sat his horse like a king on a throne, watching the chaos with detached interest. She could take him. One shot, right now, and this would be over. Her finger tightened on the trigger. But killing him wouldn't save Rowan. Wouldn't save her. Would just make her exactly what Cade had always claimed she was. Instead, she aimed 6 inches to his left and fired. The shot took the mounted rider beside Cade clean out of his saddle. The horses panicked, rearing and screaming. In the confusion, Leora worked the bolt, fired again, taking another man in the shoulder. Not killing shots, but close enough to make them reconsider. "Fall back!" Cade's voice, for the first time, held something other than confidence. "Fall back! Regroup!" The riders retreated, dragging their wounded with them. At the back door, the pounding stopped. Leora heard running footsteps, shouts, the jangle of tack as men mounted up. Then, blessed silence. She waited, counting heartbeats, making sure it wasn't a trick. Beside her, Rowan appeared, breathing hard, blood on his knuckles from hand-to-hand fighting she hadn't seen. "They're leaving," he said, disbelief clear in his voice. "For now." Leora lowered the rifle, her arms shaking with aftershock. "They'll be back." "Why'd they run? We're still outnumbered." "Because I didn't kill Cade when I had the chance, and he knows it. Now he's wondering why, wondering what I'm planning, wondering if maybe there's more resistance here than he thought." She set the rifle down carefully. "It'll buy us time. Not much, but some." Rowan stared at her. You had a shot at their leader and didn't take it. Yes. Why? Because you can't talk to a dead man. And before this is over, Kate and I are going to talk. She moved to the broken door, looked out at the blood in the snow, the bullet casings, the evidence of violence that couldn't be undone. 2 bodies lay in the clearing, the men she'd shot. Dead or dying, she couldn't tell from here and didn't particularly care. Behind her, Rowan was silent. She could feel him processing, recalculating, understanding that the woman he'd saved was more complicated than he'd thought. You knew him, he said finally. Before. Yes. He's the one you were running from. Yes. And he'll be back. Leora turned to face him. Yes. Probably with more men. Probably better prepared. And when he comes, he won't ask nicely. Rowan absorbed this, his face unreadable. Then he crossed to his gun rack, pulled down another rifle, and started checking it methodically. Then we'd better prepare too, he said. Rowan, don't. Don't tell me to leave. Don't tell me this isn't my fight. Don't tell me any of the sensible things we both know are true. He loaded the rifle with sharp, precise movements. I made my choice when I pulled you out of that street. I'm not unmaking it now. Even if it gets you killed, everyone dies eventually. Might as well die for something that matters. I'm not worth dying for. That's not your decision to make. He met her eyes, and she saw something fierce and unyielding there. You can leave if you want. Can run again, keep running forever. But I'm staying, and if they come back, I'm fighting, with or without you. Leora felt something crack in her chest. Not breaking, transforming. All those years of running alone, of trusting no one, of believing she had to carry everything herself. And here was this stubborn, impossible man, saying he'd stand with her even though it would probably get him killed. You're an idiot, she said, but her voice broke on the words. Been called worse. This is suicide. Probably. We'll both die. Maybe. He set down the rifle, crossed to her, and put his hands on her shoulders. The touch was gentle, grounding. Or maybe we win. Maybe we survive. Maybe we build something worth protecting out of this mess. His voice softened. But we'll never know if you run. And I think you're tired of running. He was right. She was so tired. Tired of fear, of isolation, of looking over her shoulder at every sound. Tired of being the only person she could count on. What if I fail you? She whispered. What if you don't? It was such a simple question, such an impossible one, because Leora's entire life had been built on the assumption that she would fail, that trust was weakness, that caring for someone meant giving them the power to destroy you. But looking at Rowan, this hard, damaged man who'd chosen to stand with her against impossible odds, she wondered if maybe she'd had it backwards all along. Maybe trust wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the only real strength there was. Okay, she said. Okay, we fight. Together. Together, Rowan agreed. They spent the next hour fortifying the cabin. Rowan knew defensible positions the way other men knew prayers, where to stack wood for cover, how to create crossfire angles, which sight lines mattered most. Leora followed his lead, helping drag furniture, board up windows, create a killing ground out of what had been a home. How many men can Cade call on? Rowan asked as they worked. Depends how angry he is, 20, maybe 30 if he's willing to pay. And how angry is he? Leora thought about the expression on Cade's face when she'd been the one to finally say no, to walk away despite his threats. Very. What did you take from him, if you don't mind me asking? Myself. She met his questioning look. I was his. That's how he saw it. His property, his possession. When I left, I stole what belonged to him. Rowan's face went hard. I see. He won't stop. Not until I'm dead or back under his control. Those are the only endings he'll accept. Then we'll give him a different ending. Rowan tested the barricade at the front door, nodded in satisfaction. You know his tactics? How he fights? He doesn't fight. He pays other people to do it for him. Leora positioned ammunition within easy reach. But his men, they're good. Ex-military, some of them. They know what they're doing. So do we. We're two people. Two people who know this ground, who have cover, who have surprise on our side. Rowan checked his weapons one more time. They're coming to us, which means we choose the battlefield. That's an advantage. It's not enough. Maybe not, but it's what we've got. He looked at her seriously. I need to know something. When they come, and they will come, are you going to freeze, going to hesitate because of what he is to you? Leora thought about all the nights she'd woken screaming, all the scars that nobody could see, all the ways Cade Mercer had tried to break her and almost succeeded. Then she thought about the woman who'd walked away anyway, who'd survived 6 months on the run, who'd faced down a mob rather than show fear. No, she said with absolute certainty. When they come, I'll be ready. Good, because I'm counting on you. Those words hit harder than she'd expected. Nobody had counted on her in years. She'd made sure of it, had built her life around being uncountable, unreliable, a ghost passing through other people's stories. But Rowan was counting on her. And somehow, impossibly, she didn't want to let him down. They finished the preparations as the sun started to sink. The cabin looked different now, less like a home, more like a fortress. Rowan seemed satisfied with their work, but Leora could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept drifting to the tree line. They won't come at night, she said. Cade's smart. He'll wait until dawn, come at us when we're tired. Then we should rest, take turns keeping watch. I'll take first shift. Your wound is healing fine. She checked the pistol one more time. And I won't be able to sleep anyway. Might as well be useful. Rowan studied her, then nodded. Wake me in 4 hours, or sooner if you hear anything. He settled onto the floor near the fire, positioning himself where he could see both doors. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into sleep. Soldier's sleep, Leora thought, the kind you learned when every rest might be your last. She took up position by the window, watching darkness claim the forest. Snow had started falling again, thick flakes that would cover tracks, muffle sound, make approach harder to detect, good and bad, depending on who was moving. Her mind drifted despite her best efforts to stay focused. She thought about the path that had led her here, the choices and chances and desperate gambles. If she'd gone west instead of north 6 months ago, she'd be dead in a ditch somewhere. If she'd chosen a different town, she'd have bled out alone. If Rowan hadn't stepped in, but he had, and that simple act of unexpected decency had changed everything. Had given her something she'd thought lost forever, a reason to stop running. I won't let you down, she whispered to the sleeping man behind her. Whatever happens tomorrow, I won't let you down. The night passed slowly. Leora watched the snow fall and thought about survival, about choice, about what it meant to stand and fight instead of running. When 4 hours had passed, she woke Rowan as promised. Anything? He asked, instantly alert. Nothing, just snow. Good. He took her position at the window. Get some sleep. You'll need it. Leora lay down where he'd been, still warm from his body heat, and closed her eyes. Sleep shouldn't have been possible, not with tomorrow looming, not with Cade out there planning his next move. But exhaustion won out over fear, and she drifted off to the sound of Rowan's quiet breathing. She dreamed of fire and blood and Cade's cold smile. But she also dreamed of standing firm, of not running, of a voice saying, I'm counting on you, like it was the most natural thing in the world. When she woke, gray light filtered through the boarded windows. Dawn. The beginning of the end, one way or another. Rowan was still at the window, looking haggard but alert. Movement in the trees, he said without preamble. They're coming. Leora was on her feet instantly, weapon in hand. How many? Can't tell yet, more than yesterday. They took positions on opposite sides of the cabin, creating interlocking fields of fire. Leora's heart hammered, but her hands were steady. Fear was just another thing to manage, like cold or hunger or pain. The riders emerged from the forest in formation. Leora counted quickly, 15, maybe 16, more than yesterday. Cade had called in reinforcements. He rode at their center, untouched by snow or worry, looking like violence incarnate. When he was close enough to be heard, he stopped and raised a hand. The riders halted. Rowan, hail! Cade's voice carried across the clearing. Last chance. Send out the woman and you can live. Keep her and you die with her. Rowan's answer was to chamber around. Cade smiled. So be it. He gave a signal and the world exploded into violence. The riders charged and Rowan fired. One man fell, then another. Leora tracked her targets with cold precision, squeezing off shots that found their marks. But there were too many, and they'd learned from yesterday. They scattered, using trees for cover, laying down suppressing fire that chewed into the cabin's walls. "They're trying to flank again," Rowan shouted over the gunfire. "I see them!" Leora swung her aim to the right, where 3 riders were trying to circle around. She dropped one, winged another, but the third made it to cover. The fight devolved into chaos. Leora lost track of time, lost track of everything except the next target, the next shot, the next breath. Wood splinters rained down as bullets tore through the cabin. The air filled with gun smoke so thick she could barely see, and through it all, Cade sat on his horse, watching. Not fighting, never fighting, just watching other men die for his pride. Something in Leora snapped. "Cover me," she yelled at Rowan. "What?" But she was already moving, throwing open the front door and stepping into the killing ground. Bullets whined past her head. She ignored them, walking forward with her pistol raised, aimed straight at Cade Mercer. "Enough!" Her voice cut through the gunfire. "Enough! This is between you and me, Cade. Let's settle it." The shooting tapered off, confusion rippling through both sides. Cade's smile widened. "Finally showing your true colors, Leora? I wondered when you'd remember what you are." "I know what I am. Do you?" She stopped 20 feet from his horse, close enough to see his eyes. "I'm someone who walked away from you, someone who chose freedom over safety, someone you couldn't break no matter how hard you tried." Brave words for a woman surrounded by my men. "Call them off. You want me? Come get me yourself. Unless you're too much of a coward to face someone who might fight back." Cade's smile froze. Behind Leora, she heard Rowan curse quietly. She was gambling everything on reading Cade right, on knowing that his pride would never let him back down from a direct challenge. "You think I won't?" Cade dismounted slowly, handed his reins to the nearest rider. "You think I need these men to handle you? I think you've never done your own dirty work in your life." He drew a knife, the blade catching weak sunlight. "Let's test that theory." They circled each other in the snow, predator and prey, except neither was sure which was which. Cade moved with practiced ease, confident in his strength, his skill, his absolute certainty that he would win. Leora moved like water, like smoke, like someone who'd learned to fight from people who couldn't afford to lose. Cade struck first, a quick slash that would have opened her throat if it connected. Leora twisted away, felt the blade whisper past her neck. She countered low, aiming for his knee, but he blocked and drove his elbow at her head. They broke apart, both breathing hard. "You've improved," Cade said. "Someone's been teaching you." "I've been teaching myself. That's what freedom means." "Freedom." He spat the word like a curse. "You think this is freedom? Running, hiding, living in fear? I offered you safety, protection, everything you needed. You offered me a cage." Leora circled right, looking for an opening. "And I'd rather die free than live in chains? That can be arranged." He came at her in a rush, knife flashing. Leora gave ground, letting him come, waiting for the moment when momentum would betray him. When he overextended on a thrust, she moved inside his guard and drove her knee into his stomach. Cade gasped, stumbled back. Blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. "See that?" Leora said quietly. "You bleed just like everyone else." Rage transformed his face. He forgot technique, forgot strategy, charged at her with pure animal fury. Leora sidestepped, hooked his ankle, and sent him sprawling into the snow. She could have ended it then, could have taken his knife, driven it home, watched the life leave his eyes. But she'd meant what she said to Rowan. Cade's death wouldn't solve anything, would just make her the monster he'd always claimed she was. Instead, she kicked the knife away and stepped back. "It's over, Cade. I'm not yours. Never was, never will be." She looked at the watching riders. "And if any of you want to die for this man's pride, come ahead. Otherwise, get on your horses and leave." The riders looked at each other, looked at their leader, sprawled in the snow, beaten by the woman he'd claimed was his property, looked at the cabin where a lone settler had held off their attack. One by one, they mounted up. "You can't—" Cade struggled to his feet. "I'm paying you so—" "Not enough to die for," one of the riders said flatly. "This is your fight, Mercer, not ours." They rode away, leaving Cade alone in the clearing. He stared at Leora with pure hatred. "This isn't over." Yes, she said softly. It is. You just don't know it yet. I'll come back. No, you won't. Because every day you don't come back, the story gets bigger. The story about how Cade Mercer was beaten by the woman he tried to own, how he limped away bloody and alone while she stood in the snow and let him live. Leora smiled without humor. Your pride won't survive that story. So you'll tell yourself you're regrouping, planning, waiting for the right moment. And that moment will never come, because deep down, you'll know you've already lost. She watched understanding dawn in his eyes, watched him realize she was right. His power had always been built on fear, on the certainty that he couldn't be beaten. But she'd beaten him, and worse, she'd done it in front of witnesses. The story would spread, and stories had power of their own. Cade Mercer turned and walked into the forest, a broken man pretending to retreat with dignity. Leora watched until he disappeared, then felt her legs give out. Rowan was there instantly, catching her before she fell. Easy, he said. Easy, you're okay. It's over. Is it? Leora looked up at him. Or did I just make everything worse? You took your life back. How could that be worse? She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that standing and fighting would solve everything, that Cade would slink away and never return, that she could finally stop running. But life had taught her that victories were temporary, that safety was an illusion, that the moment you relaxed was the moment everything fell apart. He'll come back, she said. Let him. Rowan helped her to her feet, kept his arm around her shoulders. We'll be ready. Rowan, no. No more running, no more second-guessing. His voice was fierce. You made your stand. Now live with it. We both will. Leora looked at the cabin, damaged but standing, looked at the blood in the snow, evidence of survival. Looked at Rowan, this impossible man who'd changed her entire world by refusing to look away. Together? She asked. Together, he confirmed. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Leora let herself believe it might actually be true. They stood in the clearing for a long moment after Cade disappeared, neither quite ready to acknowledge what had just happened. The snow continued to fall, covering the blood, the bullet casings, the evidence of violence with gentle indifference. Leora's hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, and she couldn't seem to stop them. Come on, Rowan said quietly, guiding her back toward the cabin. Let's get inside. The interior looked like a battlefield. Bullet holes peppered the walls, letting in thin streams of light. Shattered glass littered the floor. The table they'd used as a barricade was splintered beyond repair. But the fire still burned in the hearth, and the walls still stood, and they were both alive. That had to count for something. Rowan settled Leora into the one intact chair and moved immediately to check her wound. She'd felt it pull during the fight, but had been too focused to care. Now looking down, she saw fresh blood seeping through her shirt. Damn it, Rowan muttered. You tore the stitches. How bad? Bad enough. He was already gathering supplies, his movements sharp with controlled anger. What were you thinking walking out there like that? I was thinking it needed to end. Could have ended with you dead. Could have ended with us both dead if we'd kept fighting. Leora winced as he peeled back her shirt. At least this way, I chose how it happened. Choosing to get yourself killed isn't much of a choice. I'm not dead. Luck? Pure dumb luck. His hands were gentle despite his harsh words, cleaning the reopened wound with careful precision. You can't keep gambling with your life, Leora. Eventually, you'll lose. Says the man who stood against a mob for a complete stranger. That was different. How? Rowan paused, meeting her eyes. Because you were worth saving. This, walking into gunfire, challenging a man who wanted you dead, this was reckless. It worked, didn't it? That's not the point. Then what is the point? Leora heard her voice rising and couldn't stop it. I spent 6 months running from him. 6 months looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows, waiting for the day he'd find me. Well, he found me. And I faced him. And I won. So what exactly am I supposed to regret? Rowan was silent, threading a needle. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. I'm not saying you should regret it. I'm saying you scared the hell out of me. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Leora felt something shift in her chest, that same dangerous hope from before, only stronger now. I'm sorry, she said. I should have warned you. Should have trusted me to have your back instead of doing it alone. He began restitching the wound, each pierce of the needle a small, necessary pain. We're supposed to be in this together, remember? Can't be together if you keep running off to play hero. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was trying to end it before anyone else died. Anyone else, or me specifically? Leora looked away, unable to meet his gaze. Does it matter? Yeah, it does. Rowan tied off the last stitch. Because if you're making decisions based on keeping me safe, that's partnership. But if you're making them because you don't think I can handle myself, that's something else entirely. I know you can handle yourself. Do you? Because walking out there without warning me, without coordinating, without giving me a chance to back you up, that's not what soldiers do when they trust their partner. The word soldiers caught her attention. Were you military? Once. Long time ago. He bandaged the wound with efficient movements. Long enough that I should know better than to care what happens to civilians. But here we are. Is that what I am to you? A civilian you're protecting? Rowan's hand stilled. He looked at her, really looked, and Leora saw something complicated in his expression. No. You're the woman who's been living in my cabin for 2 weeks, who argues with everything I say, who's too stubborn to admit when she needs help, and who just beat back the demons that have been chasing her. He resumed bandaging. You're a lot of things, Leora. Civilian isn't one of them. What am I then? I'm still figuring that out. Fair enough, Leora thought. She was still figuring it out too. What they were to each other, what this thing between them meant, whether survival could transform into something more than just not dying. The cabin's a mess, she said, changing the subject to something safer. Going to take days to fix. Weeks, probably. But it'll give us something to do while we wait. Wait for what? For you to decide if you're actually staying or if you're still planning to run the minute you're healed. The question caught her off guard. In the chaos and violence, she'd forgotten about the promise she'd made to the townspeople, the assurance that she'd leave as soon as she could. Forgotten or chosen not to think about it. I don't know, she admitted. I told them I'd go. You also told Cade he wouldn't come back, and we both know that might not be true. Rowan finished the bandaging and stood, putting away his supplies. Point is, promises made under duress don't count for much. You want to leave? Leave. Want to stay? Stay. But make the decision for yourself, not because you think you owe someone something. What do you want? What I want doesn't matter. Rowan, it doesn't. He turned to face her fully. I didn't help you so you'd owe me. Didn't fight beside you so you'd feel obligated to stay. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and because somewhere along the way I started to care whether you lived or died. His voice gentled. But that doesn't mean you owe me anything. If you need to keep moving, I'll understand. Leora studied his face, reading the truth in every line and shadow. He meant it. Would let her walk away, would wish her well, would go back to his solitary life without complaint. The realization should have been freeing. Instead, it terrified her. I don't know how to stay, she whispered. How to trust that it won't all fall apart. Nobody knows that. It's a gamble every time. Rowan crossed to the window, looked out at the forest. But running's a gamble too. At least if you stay, you've got someone watching your back. Until you don't. Until I don't, he agreed. Everything ends, Leora. Question is whether you let fear of the ending stop you from having something worth losing. She wanted to argue, to point out all the logical reasons why staying was dangerous, why attachment was weakness, why caring for someone was just giving them ammunition to destroy you. But the words wouldn't come. Because Rowan was right. She'd been so focused on not losing anything that she'd never let herself have anything to lose. I need time, she said finally, to think. Well, take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere. The next few days fell into a different rhythm than before. They worked together to repair the cabin, and the physical labor left little room for deep conversations. Boards needed replacing, windows needed mending, bullet holes needed patching. They worked side by side in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. But the silences felt different now. Charged with questions neither was ready to ask, possibilities neither was ready to name. On the third day after the fight, Marcus appeared at the tree line on foot, hands clearly visible and empty. Rowan saw him first. "Stay inside," he told Leora, reaching for his rifle. "He's alone." "Could be a trick." "It's not." Leora moved to his side. "If they wanted to attack, they wouldn't send one man on foot in broad daylight." Rowan considered, then nodded. "All right, but I'm keeping the rifle handy." They stepped outside together. Marcus stopped at the edge of the clearing, clearly nervous. "I'm not here for trouble," he called. "Just to talk." "So talk," Rowan said. Marcus approached slowly, his eyes taking in the damage to the cabin, the blood-stained snow, the evidence of the battle. "We heard what happened. The riders. The fight. Heard she faced down their leader and sent them running." "You heard right. Town's talking about it. Some folks are scared, think she brought violence to our doorstep." Marcus paused. "Others think she might have saved us from worse." "And what do you think?" Leora asked. Marcus met her eyes. "I think I misjudged you. We all did. And I think Rowan was right to help you, even when it didn't make sense to the rest of us." The admission clearly cost him. Leora saw it in the tension of his shoulders, the way he couldn't quite hold her gaze. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because the town's divided. Half want you gone like we agreed. Half think you proved you're not the threat we thought." He looked between them. "And because I wanted you to know that if you decide to stay, some of us would welcome it. Not all, but some." Rowan's grip on the rifle relaxed slightly. "That why you came all the way out here? To tell us the town's having an identity crisis?" "Partly. Also wanted to offer help with repairs. We've got lumber, nails, tools. It's not much, but we don't need charity," Leora said automatically. "Not charity, trade. You helped prove our town's not worth raiding. Those men won't be coming back, and word will spread. That's worth something." Marcus shifted his weight. "Besides, Rowan's one of us, even if he prefers to pretend he's not. We take care of our own when we can." Rowan looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Marcus's expression stopped him. "We'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." Marcus started to leave, then turned back. "For what it's worth, Miss Vance, what you did, walking out there like that, took courage. The kind most of us don't have. Maybe that's why we were scared of you. We saw something in you that we don't see in ourselves." He left before Leora could respond, disappearing back into the trees. "Well," Rowan said after a moment, "that was unexpected. People can surprise you." "They can." He looked at her. "What do you think? About accepting help from the town?" Leora considered. Pride said refuse, self-sufficiency said handle it alone. But maybe that was just fear talking, fear dressed up as strength. "I think we need the supplies," she said carefully, "and I think refusing help when it's offered is just another way of running." "You're learning." "Don't sound so smug about it." That evening, as they shared a simple meal by the repaired fire, Leora found herself watching Rowan when he wasn't looking, studying the way he moved, the quiet competence in everything he did, the way he seemed content with silence, but never uncomfortable with conversation. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Can I stop you?" "Probably not." She set down her bowl. "Why'd you really come out here? 3 years alone in the wilderness? That's not just wanting solitude. That's running from something." Rowan was quiet for a long time. "You're not wrong. So what were you running from?" "The same thing everyone runs from. Memories, choices. The person I was before everything fell apart." He stared into the fire. "I told you about my daughter, about losing her and her mother. What I didn't tell you is that it was my fault." Leora started to protest, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. I was a soldier, like I said. Gone more than I was home. Told myself I was protecting them, providing for them, doing what needed to be done. But really, I was avoiding the hard work of actually being present." His voice went rough. "When the fever came, I was 3 territories away, chasing glory or honor, or whatever lie I was telling myself that week. By the time I got back, they were already gone. That's not your fault, isn't it? If I'd been there, maybe I could have gotten medicine faster. Maybe I could have done something, anything, instead of riding in to find 2 graves and a house that felt like a tomb." He looked at her. "So I came out here. Figured if I couldn't protect the people who mattered, at least I could stop failing them by not having anyone to fail." Leora felt tears prickling her eyes. That's the stupidest logic I've ever heard. Probably. You can't spend your whole life punishing yourself for being human. Why not? You've been doing the same thing. The observation hit like a physical blow. Because he was right. She'd been punishing herself for years, for trusting Cade, for not seeing through him sooner, for all the ways she'd failed to protect herself. We're a pair, aren't we? She said softly. Both running from ourselves. Yeah, we are. Rowan moved closer, and in the firelight, his eyes were gentle. But maybe that's why this works. We understand each other's scars. Or maybe we're both too damaged to know what healthy looks like. Could be that too. He smiled, small and real. But I'd rather be damaged with someone than perfect alone. Leora felt something break loose in her chest, some final barrier she'd been holding on to out of habit more than necessity. She reached out and took his hand, rough and calloused and steady. I want to stay, she said. Not because I owe you, not because I'm scared of what's out there, because I want to see what we could build if we stopped running long enough to actually try. You sure? Because once you commit, I'm not letting you back out easy. I'm sure. And she was. Terrified, uncertain, convinced it would probably end badly, but sure. I'm staying, Rowan, for as long as you'll have me. He squeezed her hand. That might be a long time. Good. They sat together as the fire burned low, hands clasped, neither speaking. Outside, wind howled through the trees, but inside, the cabin felt warm and safe, and, impossibly, like home. The days that followed were different in subtle ways. They still worked side by side, still fell into comfortable silences, still moved around each other with practiced ease. But there was an awareness now, an acknowledgement of something deeper than survival or circumstance. When Marcus and 3 other men from town arrived with lumber and supplies, Leora didn't hide. She stood beside Rowan and accepted their help with quiet gratitude. They worked together, town and wilderness, settler and stranger, raising new walls and mending what had been broken. You're good with carpentry, one of the men observed as Leora fitted a board into place. Had to learn. Couldn't always count on having shelter. Well, you've got shelter now, long as you want it. The casual acceptance in those words meant more than Leora could express. She just nodded and kept working. Over the next week, other townspeople came. Some brought food, others tools, a few just curiosity. Leora met them all with cautious openness, and slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice, the fear in their eyes transformed into something else. Not quite trust, not yet, but possibility. One evening, as they were finishing repairs on the roof, Rowan paused and looked out over the forest. What? Leora asked, following his gaze. Nothing, just thinking how different things look from up here. Different how? Less lonely. He glanced at her. I got used to seeing this view alone. Having company changes it. Better or worse? Better. Definitely better. They climbed down as the sun set, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. The cabin looked almost new, stronger for having been broken and rebuilt. Leora ran her hand along the fresh timber, feeling the solidity of it. We did good work, she said. We did. Rowan stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Question is, what do we do now? What do you mean? Cabin's fixed. Winter's ending soon. You've faced down your demons, proved you can stand and fight. You could still leave if you wanted. Go anywhere. Start fresh. Leora turned to face him fully. Is that what you want? For me to leave? No. But I need to know you're staying because you want to, not because you think it's what I want. I told you. You told me you wanted to see what we could build. But wanting and doing are different things. His expression was serious. I need to know, Leora. Are you staying because this place feels like home, or because you haven't figured out where else to go? It was a fair question, hard but fair. Leora took a moment to really examine her feelings, to separate fear from desire, habit from choice. I'm staying because for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm just surviving, she said slowly. I'm living. Actually living, not just moving through days waiting for the next disaster. And that's not about the place. It's about you. She saw something shift in his eyes, some last wall coming down. When I'm with you, I don't have to pretend to be anything other than what I am, she continued. Damaged, difficult, dangerous. You see all of it, and you stay anyway. That's not something I'm willing to walk away from. Not anymore. Rowan reached out and cupped her face in his hand, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. I see all of it because I recognize it. We're mirrors, you and me, reflecting back each other's scars and strengths. Is that enough? For a life? It's more than enough. It's everything. He kissed her then, gentle and certain, and Leora felt the last of her fear dissolve. This was real, terrifying and fragile and absolutely real. When they broke apart, she was smiling. So what now? Now we live. Build something worth protecting. Make a home out of this cabin and each other. That simple? That's simple. That complicated. He kissed her forehead. But we'll figure it out together. Together, Leora agreed. The word had become a promise, a commitment, a future neither of them had dared imagine weeks ago. But standing in front of their rebuilt cabin, Rowan's arms around her and the forest stretching endlessly in all directions, Leora let herself believe it. She'd spent so long running toward nowhere that she'd forgotten what it felt like to run toward something. But this partnership, this possibility, this fragile, beautiful thing growing between them, this was worth every risk. As they headed inside, Leora took one last look at the forest. Somewhere out there, Cade Mercer was nursing his wounds and his wounded pride. Somewhere out there, danger still waited. But for tonight, for this moment, she was safe. She was home. And that, more than anything else, was worth fighting for. The possibility lasted exactly 6 more days before the shadow of the past came knocking again. Leora woke one morning to find Rowan already up, working at the table with papers spread before him. She watched him from the bed, studying the way morning light caught in his gray-streaked hair, the concentration furrowing his brow as he sketched something with careful precision. "What are you doing?" she asked, sitting up and wincing slightly as her healing wound pulled. "Planning?" He didn't look up, kept drawing lines and angles on a scrap of paper. "We're going to need more space if we're serious about staying, about building a real life here." "More space for what?" "For living. Actually living, not just surviving day to day." He glanced at her, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression. "Was thinking we could extend the cabin. Add another room, maybe 2. Build a proper workshop where you could work on carpentry. Expand the storage so we're not living hand to mouth every winter." Leora crossed to him, her bare feet cold on the wooden floor, and peered at his rough sketches. They showed the cabin doubled in size, with additions that spoke of permanence, of futures measured in years rather than weeks. A larger main room, separate sleeping quarters, a covered porch facing east to catch the sunrise. Every line spoke of intention, of a man planning not just for survival, but for a life worth living. "That's a lot of work," she said quietly, tracing one of his drawings with her finger. "We've got time, and help, if we want it." Rowan set down his pencil and turned to face her fully. "Marcus said the town would be willing to assist, called it a way of making amends for what happened, for how they treated you." "And you trust them? After everything?" The old wariness crept into her voice. "After they nearly killed me in that street? Trust's a strong word, but people can change. We're proof of that, aren't we?" He pulled her down to sit beside him. "Besides, we can't build everything ourselves. Not if we want to do it right, make it last. And I want this to last, Leora. Want us to last." She studied the plans, imagining what the cabin could become. A real home, built deliberately rather than cobbled together from desperation and necessity. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. "What if it doesn't work?" she asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her. "What if I wake up one day and the fear comes back stronger than ever and I need to run? What if I can't do this, can't stay in one place, can't trust that it won't all fall apart?" Rowan was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he took her hand in both of his, rough calluses against her skin. "Then you run, and I'll be here when you come back." "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. Not easy. Never said it would be easy. But simple." His gray eyes held hers steadily. "I'm not trying to trap you, Leora. I'm trying to build something worth returning to. Something that calls you home instead of driving you away." The distinction mattered more than she could express. All her life, people had tried to hold her through force, through obligation, through fear. Rowan was the first person who'd offered to hold her through choice, through building something she'd want to stay for. She squeezed his hand. Okay, let's do it. Let's build something that lasts. His smile transformed his entire face, made him look years younger. Yeah? Yeah. Together. Together, he confirmed, and sealed it with a kiss that tasted like coffee and promise. The work began the following week when the weather cleared enough for construction. Marcus arrived with 4 men from town, the blacksmith Garrett, William, and 2 others Leora had seen but never spoken to. They brought lumber and tools and a willingness to work that surprised her more than she wanted to admit. "We owe you," Marcus said simply when Rowan tried to refuse the help. "You stood up for her when we were ready to tear her apart. That takes character we didn't show. Let us make it right." They didn't ask invasive questions about where Leora had come from or what she was running from. They didn't treat her with suspicion or fear or the careful distance of people handling something dangerous. They simply worked, and in the working, a tentative bridge began to form between the woman who'd been a stranger and the community that had rejected her. "Hand me that hammer," Garrett asked on the second day, gesturing toward the tool beside Leora. She passed it to him, bracing for suspicion or awkwardness, or instead, he nodded thanks without hesitation, as casual as if they'd been working together for years. Such a small thing, that nod, but it spoke volumes of acceptance, of seeing her as simply another person rather than a threat to be managed or a problem to be solved. "You're good with your hands," William observed that afternoon, watching Leora fit boards together with practiced precision. "Where'd you learn carpentry?" "Here and there. Picked it up out of necessity, mostly." She didn't elaborate, and he didn't push, just nodded and went back to his own work. By the end of the first week, the frame for the new room stood strong against the sky. Leora and Rowan worked alongside the townspeople from dawn until dusk, and slowly, conversation began to flow more easily. Stories were shared, carefully at first, then with growing comfort. She learned that Garrett had lost his wife to childbirth 3 years ago, that William was saving money to buy his own land, that Marcus had come west after the war with nothing but determination and a dream of building something peaceful. "You planning to farm come spring?" William asked one afternoon as they took a break, sharing water from a common bucket. "Haven't thought that far ahead," Leora admitted, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Should. Land's good here, rich soil, decent water access. Could grow enough to feed yourselves and sell surplus in town." He grinned, boyish despite his weathered face. "Always need more farmers willing to work hard land. It's honest work, and it feeds people. What could be better?" "I don't know anything about farming. Never stayed anywhere long enough to learn." "Neither did any of us when we started. You learn by doing, by making mistakes and fixing them." William stretched his back. "Besides, you're good with your hands. Carpentry, hunting, fighting, farming's just another skill. You'll pick it up." The casual inclusion in that statement, "You're one of us now," it implied, made Leora's throat tight with unexpected emotion. She nodded and went back to work, not trusting herself to speak around the lump that had formed. That evening, after the townspeople had left and the cabin was quiet except for the crackle of the fire, Rowan found her sitting outside on a half-finished section of the new porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and purple. "You okay?" he asked, settling beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "Yeah, just thinking." About? About how strange it is. Belonging somewhere. She accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "I spent so long making absolutely sure I didn't belong anywhere. Didn't put down roots, didn't make connections, didn't give anyone a reason to remember me, that I forgot what it felt like. And what does it feel like now? Scary. Good. Like I'm walking on ice that might crack any second, but I'm doing it anyway because the alternative is standing still forever." She leaned against his shoulder. "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Rowan kissed the top of her head. "That's called trust. You're getting better at it. Don't know if better is the right word. Less terrible, maybe." "I'll take it." He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You know what I realized today? Watching you work with those men, laughing at William's terrible jokes, teaching Garrett that carpentry trick with the angles, you're not just surviving anymore. You're living. Is there a difference? All the difference in the world. Surviving is just not dying. Living is finding reasons to want to wake up tomorrow. He gestured at the construction around them. This? This is living. Building something that matters. Being part of something bigger than just yourself. Leora sat with that thought as darkness fell around them. She'd been surviving for so long that she'd forgotten there was another option. But Rowan was right. Somewhere between that first terrifying night and now, survival had transformed into something more. Something that felt almost like happiness. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. That it won't last. That something will come along and destroy it. Something probably will. That's life. Nothing lasts forever. Everything breaks eventually. Rowan's voice was gentle. But being scared of the ending doesn't mean you should skip the middle. That's where all the good stuff is. When did you get so wise? Around the time I met a stubborn woman who taught me that taking chances is better than hiding from life. They sat together as the stars emerged, and Leora felt something settle in her chest that she barely recognized. Not quite peace, she wasn't sure she'd ever have that, but something close. Something like hope that had stopped being terrifying and started being possible. 3 weeks into construction, just as the new addition was beginning to take real shape, a lone rider approached the cabin at sunset. Leora saw him first, her instincts still sharp despite the growing comfort of routine. Her hand moved automatically toward the rifle propped by the door, but something about the rider's posture made her pause. He was slumped in the saddle, moving slowly, clearly exhausted or injured or both. The horse looked nearly as bad, lathered with sweat despite the cold air. "Rowan!" she called, her voice tight with tension. He emerged from the new addition immediately, saw the rider, and went on alert. "Stay behind me. It's not an attack. Look at him. He can barely sit his horse." They watched as the rider drew closer, and when he was near enough to make out features in the fading light, Leora's breath caught in her throat. It was one of Cade's men, the one she'd shot in the shoulder during that violent confrontation weeks ago. "That's far enough," Rowan called, rifle raised and ready. "State your business." The man raised his good hand in surrender, the other arm hanging stiffly at his side. "Not here for trouble, just need to talk to her." He nodded toward Leora with something that looked almost like respect. "Please, it's important." "Talk then, from right where you are." The man dismounted awkwardly, favoring his injured side, nearly falling in the process. Up close, Leora could see he was young, barely 20 if that, with eyes that had seen too much too fast, the kind of eyes she recognized from her own mirror. "Name's Jacob," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I rode with Mercer, was one of the men who came after you that day." "I remember," Leora said coldly, her hand still near her weapon. "I put a bullet in you." "Yeah, you did." He touched his shoulder gingerly, and she saw him wince. "And I deserved it. We all did. What we tried to do to you, there's no excuse for it." "If you're here for revenge," Rowan started, but Jacob shook his head quickly. "I'm not. I'm here to warn you." He glanced around nervously, like he expected to see riders emerging from the trees. "Mercer's coming back, soon. He's been gathering men, making plans, spending money he doesn't have, and this time he's not taking any chances." Leora felt ice slide down her spine, that old familiar fear trying to reclaim its hold. How many men? 20? Maybe more. I stopped counting after 18. Jacob's face was grim. "And he's paying well. Bringing in professionals this time, not just drifters and ranch hands looking for easy money. Real killers, men who know what they're doing." "When?" Rowan's voice was hard, controlled, but Leora could hear the tension underneath. "Week, maybe 2 at most. He wanted me to ride ahead, scout the area, report back on your defenses, find your weak points." Jacob met Leora's eyes directly. "But I'm done working for him. Done helping men like him take from people like you. Done being part of something that makes me sick to my stomach." "Why should we believe you?" Leora demanded, even as part of her recognized the truth in his words. "This could be a trick, a way to make us drop our guard." "Because I saw what you did. Saw you beat him fair when you could have just shot him in the back. Saw you give him mercy when any sane person would have put him down like a rabid dog." His voice cracked slightly. "Saw you build something here instead of just destroying and taking like he does. Like I've been doing." He paused, struggling with emotion. "My sister was like you once. Ran from a bad situation, tried to start over somewhere new, somewhere safe. She didn't make it. Some men found her and they... He stopped, swallowed hard. Maybe if someone had helped her the way Hale helped you, she'd still be alive. Maybe if she'd found someone willing to stand with her instead of just taking what they wanted, things would have been different. The raw pain in his words rang true in a way that lies never could. Leora looked at Rowan, saw her own uncertainty reflected in his face. They'd been preparing for the possibility of Cade returning, but hearing it confirmed, hearing the numbers, the timeline, made it terrifyingly real. Even if you're telling the truth, Rowan said carefully, what do you expect us to do? Run? Hide? We already fought him off once, sent him away bloody and beaten. This is different. He's not coming to capture her anymore, not coming to drag her back and make an example of her. Jacob's expression was grim, haunted. He's coming to prove a point, to show that nobody walks away from Cade Mercer and lives to tell about it, to demonstrate what happens when you embarrass him, make him look weak in front of his men. So what do you suggest? Leora asked, though she already knew what he'd say. Leave, both of you, tonight if possible. Go somewhere he can't find you, somewhere far enough away that he'll give up the chase eventually. Start over. Jacob's voice was urgent now. You can't win this fight. Not with 20 trained killers coming for you, not with the kind of money Mercer's spending to make sure you're dead. No? Rowan's voice was flat, final, leaving no room for argument. I'm not running from my home. Not for him. Not for anyone. Then you'll die here. Maybe. But at least I'll die standing on my own land, protecting what's mine. Jacob turned to Leora, desperation clear in his eyes. Talk sense into him. You know what Mercer's capable of better than anyone. You know he won't stop, won't show mercy, won't rest until you're both in the ground. She did know. She knew exactly what Cade was capable of, had spent 6 months running from that knowledge, had the scars, visible and invisible, to prove it. Every instinct she'd honed over years of survival screamed at her to take Jacob's advice, to pack up and disappear before Cade arrived with his army of killers. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out. Words that surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise Jacob. No, she said firmly. We're not running. You're both insane, probably. She moved to stand beside Rowan, shoulder to shoulder. But this is our home, our choice, our stand. And I'm done letting Cade Mercer dictate my life, determine where I can go and who I can be. Jacob stared at them like they'd completely lost their minds. You'll need help then, serious help. More than just the two of you, no matter how good you are. We'll get help, Rowan said with more confidence than Leora felt. From who? The town? Jacob laughed bitterly. They folded once already, nearly killed her themselves. What makes you think they'll stand with you now? People change. We're proof of that. Leora's voice was hard, certain. And if they won't help, we'll fight anyway. But we're not leaving, not anymore. I'm done running. Jacob shook his head slowly, something like admiration mixing with the disbelief in his expression. You're braver than I thought, or stupider, haven't decided which yet. He turned toward his exhausted horse. I'll scout the approaches, keep watch, let you know when they're close. It's the least I can do. Why? Rowan asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Why help us at all? Why betray Mercer when he's the one paying you? Because somebody should have helped my sister when she needed it. Because Mercer destroys everything he touches, ruins anyone who gets close, and I'm tired of being part of that destruction. Jacob mounted up with visible difficulty, his injured shoulder clearly paining him. And because what you two have here, this thing you're building together, it deserves a chance to survive. Deserves better than being burned down by a man who can't stand the thought of losing control. He rode away into the gathering darkness, leaving Leora and Rowan alone with the weight of what was coming, with the knowledge that their fragile peace was about to be shattered. We should tell the town, Rowan said finally, breaking the heavy silence. Give them the choice to help or stay clear. They deserve to know what's coming their way. They'll tell us to leave. Or worse, they'll offer to hand me over to Cade themselves, hope that satisfies him. Maybe, maybe not. Only one way to find out. Rowan took her hand. But we go together. We tell them together. That matters. They rode into Coldwater Ridge the next morning, and Leora felt the familiar tension of being watched, evaluated, judged by eyes she couldn't see. But it was different now. The naked fear she'd seen in those first terrible moments had been replaced by something more complex. Wariness, yes, but also recognition. Respect, even. She wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was the woman who'd faced down raiders and lived, who'd stood when running would have been easier, who'd chosen to build instead of destroy. Marcus met them at the general store. His expression troubled the moment he saw their faces. "What's wrong? What happened?" "Need to gather the town," Rowan said without preamble. "Everyone who can make it. This affects all of you, and you deserve to hear it directly." Within an hour, the meeting hall was packed. Leora stood before faces she'd come to recognize over the past weeks of working together. The blacksmith Garrett who'd led the mob against her. The woman who'd pulled her child away in fear. William and Marcus and dozens of others whose names she'd learned, whose stories she'd heard, whose lives had become somehow intertwined with her own. Rowan stood beside her, solid and unwavering. She drew strength from his presence and began, her voice clear and steady despite the fear threatening to choke her. "Cade Mercer is coming back," she said without preamble, without softening the blow. "The man who came for me before. The one whose men I fought off. He's bringing more men this time, 20 or more, all professionals, all well-armed. And this time he's not interested in taking me alive. He wants revenge. For his pride, for his loss, for the humiliation of being beaten by someone he thought he owned." The crowd erupted in worried murmurs, fear rippling through the packed room like wind through grass. Leora waited for them to quiet, her hands clenched at her sides to stop them from shaking. "I'm telling you this because you deserve to know," she continued once the noise died down. "Your town is in the path of what's coming, and you need to make a choice, a real choice, with full knowledge of what it means." She paused, meeting their eyes one by one, seeing the fear and anger and uncertainty there. "You can tell us to leave, can pack us up and send us on our way in hope that satisfies Mercer when he arrives. Can even hand me over to him when he shows up, offer me up like a sacrifice and pray that appeases him." Her voice hardened. "Or you can stand with us, can show Mercer and men like him that Coldwater Ridge doesn't bow to bullies and murderers, doesn't trade people's lives for the illusion of safety." "Why should we risk our lives for you?" Garrett demanded, his voice loud in the sudden silence. "You brought this trouble here. You brought Mercer and his men to our doorstep. Why should we pay for your past?" "She brought trouble that was already coming," Marcus interrupted, before Leora could respond. "You think men like Mercer stop with one person? You think he'll leave us alone after he's done with her? We show weakness now. We show them we're willing to trade people for peace. We become targets. We become the kind of place raiders know they can push around, can come to whenever they want something." "Marcus is right," William added, stepping forward. "We fight for her. We fight for ourselves. For the right to live without fear, without constantly wondering when the next group of armed men will ride in and take what they want." "Or we all die trying," someone called from the back, and nervous agreement rippled through the crowd. "Better to die standing than live on your knees," Rowan said quietly, but his voice cut through the noise like a blade. The room went silent. "I know most of you don't know me well. No, I keep to myself. Don't involve myself in town business. Prefer my own company to crowds. But this is my business now. This Leora's my business, and I'm not abandoning either one." "Pretty words," Garrett said, though there was less hostility in his voice than before. "But words don't stop bullets. Words don't protect our families when armed killers come riding in." "No, but people do. People willing to stand together, to protect what's theirs, to say enough is enough." Rowan's voice strengthened, filled with conviction. "You've all built lives here. Families, homes, futures. Mercer and men like him want to take that from you, whether it's today or tomorrow or next year. The only question is, when do you draw the line? When do you say this far and no further?" Leora watched faces shift as Rowan spoke, saw the moment when fear began to transform into something else. Not courage, not yet, but the possibility of courage. The ember that might, with enough air and fuel, become a flame. An older woman stood slowly from her seat near the back. Leora recognized her as the innkeeper, someone who'd treated her with cautious kindness during the cabin construction, who'd shared bread and stories during lunch breaks. "I lost my husband to raiders 5 years back," she said, her voice cracking with old grief. "They came through, took what they wanted, killed anyone who resisted. We did nothing, told ourselves we were being smart, being safe. being practical. But I've regretted that cowardice every single day since. Wondered if John would still be alive if we'd stood together instead of cowering separately. She looked directly at Leora, and there were tears in her eyes. I won't make that mistake again. Won't let fear turn me into a coward twice. I'll stand with you, girl. Whatever comes. One by one, others stood. William, his young face set with determination. Marcus, nodding slowly as if confirming a decision he'd already made. The farmer Leora had shared lunch with, the one who'd taught her about crop rotation. A young couple who'd brought blankets during the cabin repairs. An old man with a scarred face who'd said nothing during the entire meeting until now. Not everyone stood. Some remained seated, fear written clearly on their faces, and Leora didn't blame them, couldn't blame them. They had families to protect, lives to preserve, futures to consider. Standing meant risking everything, and not everyone could make that gamble. But enough stood, more than enough. Then we prepare, Rowan said, and his voice had shifted into something different, the voice of a soldier, a leader, someone who'd done this before. We've got a week, maybe two. We use that time to fortify the town, set up defensive positions, arm everyone who can hold a weapon. We turn Coldwater Ridge into a place that's not worth the cost of taking. And pray Mercer doesn't bring an army big enough that cost doesn't matter, Garrett muttered, but he stood too, his massive blacksmith's arms crossed over his chest. The meeting dissolved into planning, into organizing, into the 1,000 small tasks that would transform a frontier town into a fortress. Leora found herself at the center of it all, her experience with violence and survival suddenly valuable in ways she'd never imagined. The next 12 days were a blur of constant preparation. The town transformed before her eyes. Barricades went up at key approach points, constructed from wagons and lumber and anything else that could stop a bullet. Sight lines were cleared, giving defenders clean shots at anyone trying to enter. Ammunition was distributed and carefully inventoried. Food and water were stockpiled in central locations. Escape routes were planned for women and children. Rowan, with his military experience, organized the defenses with methodical precision. He walked the town's perimeter dozens of times, studying angles and approaches, identifying weak points and fortifying them. He drilled the defenders relentlessly, teaching them how to shoot under pressure, how to reload quickly, how to stay calm when chaos erupted around them. Leora worked alongside him, teaching those who'd never fought how to hold their ground, how to face fear and keep functioning, how to trust the person beside you to watch your back. She saw herself in their nervous faces, remembered being that scared, that uncertain, that convinced she wouldn't survive. "Keep your breathing steady," she told a young woman whose hands wouldn't stop shaking as she held a rifle. "Fear's natural, normal. It's your body preparing you to fight or run. Let it make you careful, not careless." "What if I can't do it?" the woman whispered. "What if when the moment comes, I freeze? What if I get someone killed? Then someone else will have your back. That's why we fight together instead of alone." Leora squeezed her shoulder gently. "You're stronger than you think. We all are." On the 10th day, Jacob returned, riding in hard, his horse lathered with sweat and nearly foundering. "They're coming," he gasped as soon as he could speak. "Tomorrow. Maybe tonight if they push through the dark. Mercer's done waiting, done planning. He's ready." "How many?" Rowan demanded, already moving into action. 23 total. All armed, all experienced fighters. Jacob dismounted on shaking legs. "And he's got something planned, something he wouldn't tell the men about. But he's confident, too confident, like he knows something we don't." Leora and Rowan exchanged looks. "Fire?" she guessed, thinking tactically. "Probably. Or explosives. Maybe both. Something to flush you out of defensive positions, force you into the open where his numbers advantage matters more." They gathered the town defenders in the meeting hall one final time. 53 people, young and old, farmers and merchants and ranch hands, people who'd probably never fired a shot in anger, and people who'd seen too much violence already. All scared, all determined, all choosing to stand. "Tomorrow, we face something most of you have never faced before," Rowan began, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was saying. "Real violence. Not fights at the saloon or hunting accidents or arguments that get out of hand. Men coming to kill you because you had the courage to stand against them." He paused, letting that sink in. watching faces pale, watching a few people edge toward the door. No one left, but the temptation was clear. I won't lie to you. Some of us might die tomorrow, probably will die. That's the reality of what we're choosing. His voice gentled slightly. But here's what else is true. We're fighting on our ground, for our homes, for our right to live free from fear and intimidation. That matters. That gives us an edge they don't have, can't buy with money or threats. They have experience, someone pointed out, voice shaking. They've done this before. We're just farmers and shopkeepers. They do have experience. But experience makes you confident, and confidence makes you careless. Rowan's voice hardened. They think we're soft, scared, easy prey. They think we'll break the moment the shooting starts. They think we're not worth their full attention. We're going to prove them wrong. We're going to show them what people defending their homes are capable of. Leora stepped forward, adding her voice to his. I know some of you are here because you feel obligated. Others because you're angry at being threatened. Some because you're too stubborn to run and too proud to surrender. It doesn't matter why you're here. What matters is that when the fighting starts, you don't have to be brave. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be there. Present. Watching your neighbor's back like they're watching yours. What if we lose? A voice called from somewhere in the crowd. Then we lose fighting for something that mattered, Leora said simply, meeting their eyes without flinching. Better than any alternative I can think of. Better than living the rest of your life wondering if you could have made a difference. Better than survival without dignity. The meeting dissolved into smaller groups, people checking weapons one final time, reinforcing positions that already seemed solid, saying what might be final words to loved ones. The air was thick with fear and determination in equal measure. Leora found herself alone with Rowan at the edge of town as sunset approached, watching the forest where Cade would emerge. The forest that had been her refuge, her prison, her salvation. Now it would become a battlefield. No matter what happens tomorrow, she said quietly, not looking at him, I want you to know something. Don't. His voice was rough. Don't do the goodbye speech. Don't start saying things like they're the last words you'll ever say. It's not goodbye. It's thank you. She turned to face him fully. For seeing me when everyone else saw a threat. For standing when you could have walked away. For teaching me that trust isn't weakness, that staying isn't surrender, that building something is harder and braver than destroying it. You taught yourself that. I just provided the opportunity, the space to figure it out. Still, I needed you to know. She kissed him, soft and fierce, and full of everything she couldn't quite articulate. If this goes bad, it won't. But if it does, don't blame yourself. You gave me something worth fighting for. That's more than I ever expected to have, more than I thought I deserved. Rowan pulled her close, his arms solid around her. We're going to win tomorrow. Going to send Mercer running with his tail between his legs or put him in the ground where he belongs. And then we're going to finish building our home and live a long, boring, peaceful life together. Promise? Promise. They stood together as darkness fell, two people who'd found each other in the chaos of violence and somehow built something worth protecting. Tomorrow would bring blood and fire, and the kind of fear that broke people into pieces. But tonight, they had each other, and that would have to be enough. Dawn broke cold and clear, the sky that particular shade of blue that promised a beautiful day, completely at odds with what was coming. Leora stood at her assigned position, a second-floor window in the general store, with a clear view of the main approach, and waited. Around her, the town held its breath. She'd been waiting for 3 hours when they finally came. 23 riders emerged from the tree line in perfect formation, moving with the precision of experienced fighters who'd done this 100 times before. They weren't raiders or drifters or desperate men looking for easy money. They were professionals, and it showed in every measured movement. Cade rode at their center, and even from a distance, Leora could see the cold fury in his bearing. He sat his horse like a king surveying land he intended to claim, and the arrogance in that posture made rage flare hot in her chest. The rider stopped just outside rifle range, exactly where experienced fighters would stop, far enough to be safe but close enough to make their point. Cade dismounted slowly, deliberately, and walked forward alone. He stopped in the middle of the street, looking around at the barricades, the fortified positions, the evidence of preparation. Leora Vance! His voice carried across the silence, rich and mocking. I know you're here. I know this pathetic excuse for a town is protecting you, hiding you, like a child hiding stolen candy. Last chance. Come out now. Come to me willingly. And they live. Hide like the coward you are, and I burn this place to ash with you in it. Leora stood, moved to the window where he could see her clearly. She felt Rowan tense from his position across the street, felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her. You want me, Cade? She called back, her voice steady. Come get me, if you're brave enough. His smile was sharp and terrible, predatory in a way that still sent shivers down her spine despite everything. With pleasure. He gave a signal, and everything happened at once. The riders charged, and the town opened fire. The carefully prepared killing ground did its brutal work. 2 riders fell in the first volley, their horses screaming and rearing. 3 more went down in the second volley, bodies tumbling from saddles to lie still in the dirt. But Cade's men were professionals. They scattered immediately, taking cover behind anything available, returning fire with devastating accuracy. Windows shattered, wood splintered. Someone screamed from a position Leora couldn't see. She forced herself to focus, to block out everything except the next target, the next shot. A rider was trying to flank their position, using a water trough for cover. Leora sighted carefully, breathed out, squeezed the trigger. He fell. She worked the bolt, found another target, fired again. Below her in the street, hand-to-hand fighting had broken out. Rowan was there, his rifle empty, using it as a club with devastating efficiency. Marcus fought beside him, and William, and a dozen others whose courage she'd doubted, but who now stood firm. They were holding. Against all odds, against professional killers, the town was holding its ground. Then she saw the smoke. Fire, just as they'd predicted. 3 buildings on the east side were burning, flames spreading fast in the dry wood despite the attempts to make them fire-resistant. People broke from defensive positions to fight the fires, and Cade's men used the chaos to advance, pressing their advantage. Fall back, Rowan's voice cut through the noise, harsh with command. Controlled retreat to the center positions. Don't break formation. The defenders pulled back grudgingly, giving ground foot by foot, making the raiders pay for every inch with blood and bullets. Leora provided covering fire from above, her rifle growing hot in her hands as she dropped anyone who got too aggressive in their pursuit. But they were being pushed back. Slowly, methodically, Cade's superior numbers and training were telling. Another defender fell, then another. The carefully planned positions were being overrun one by one. This is it, Leora thought with strange calm. This is where it ends. Then Jacob appeared from the south, riding hard with 10 men behind him. Not Cade's men, townsfolk from neighboring settlements, rough farmers and ranchers who'd heard what was happening and decided to take a stand. They slammed into the raiders' flank, and suddenly the tide shifted. The raiders found themselves caught between 2 forces, their neat formations disrupted, their tactical advantage evaporating. Confusion spread through their ranks. Men started to look for escape routes instead of targets. Hold them! Rowan roared. Don't let them regroup! The defenders pressed forward, driving into the chaos with renewed determination. Leora saw Garrett using his massive strength to literally throw a raider off his feet. Saw William fighting with desperate courage despite his obvious terror. Saw the innkeeper who'd lost her husband standing firm with a rifle, her face set in grim determination. The raiders' formation broke completely. Self-preservation overrode discipline. Men turned to run, abandoning their wounded, their honor, their mission. Within minutes, half of Cade's hired army was in full retreat. But Cade himself stood in the middle of the street, watching his carefully planned attack dissolve around him. When his eyes found Leora in the window, she saw pure hatred there, unfiltered and absolute. He raised his pistol with deliberate slowness, aimed straight at her heart. Leora aimed back, her hand steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. They fired simultaneously. She felt the bullet pass so close to her head that it stirred her hair, felt the wind of its passage. Her own shot took Cade in the shoulder, spinning him around with the impact. He dropped to one knee but didn't fall, his face a mask of pain and rage and disbelief. Rowan was there in an instant, rifle leveled at Cade's head. It's over, Mercer. It's never over, Cade spat, blood running down his arm. She's mine. She'll always be mine. She's not. Never was. That's the lie you told yourself, and it cost you everything. Rowan's voice was absolutely calm, final. You can accept that and live, stand trial for what you've done. Or you can keep fighting and die here in the dirt. Your choice. Make it now. Cade looked around at his scattered men, at the burning buildings, at the town that had refused to bow. For the first time since Leora had known him, she saw something other than arrogance in his face. She saw defeat. Real, complete defeat. Take him, Rowan said to Marcus. Lock him up secure until we can get the territorial marshal out here. And get a doctor for his shoulder. I want him alive to stand trial. As they dragged Cade away, still cursing and threatening and refusing to accept reality, Leora climbed down from her position. The street was chaos, wounded being tended, fires being fought, the living checking on the living and mourning the dead. But they'd won. Against impossible odds, they'd stood and fought and won. Rowan found her in the crowd, pulled her into his arms without a word. She held him tight, feeling his heart hammer against her chest, feeling the tremors running through both of them as the adrenaline faded. You all right? He asked against her hair. Few close calls, nothing serious. You? Same. We lost people, though. His voice went heavy. Jennings took a bullet to the chest. Old man Crawford's barn collapsed on him during the fire. Sarah's boy got caught in the crossfire. The names hit hard. People she'd worked beside, laughed with, taught to defend themselves, dead because they'd chosen to stand with her. This is my fault, she started, but Rowan cut her off. No, this is Cade Mercer's fault. His choices, his violence, his inability to let go of something that was never his to hold. He pulled back to look at her. And it's over now. Finally. Truly over. The cleanup took days that blurred into weeks, rebuilding the burned structures, tending the wounded, burying the dead with the honor they deserved. Cade was tried by the territorial marshal when he finally arrived, and the sentence was 15 years in a distant territorial prison. His men scattered to the winds, the story of their defeat spreading faster than they could run from it. Leora and Rowan finished their cabin addition in early spring as the snow melted and new life began to push through the frozen ground. The extra rooms felt cavernous at first, empty and echoing, but Leora had plans for them, a workshop for her growing carpentry skills, storage for the farm equipment they'd need, space for the life they were building together, room for possibilities they hadn't yet imagined. On the first anniversary of the day, Rowan had pulled her from the mob, a year since her life had changed forever in the space of a few terrifying minutes. They stood together in front of the completed cabin. The trees were green with new growth, and the air smelled like pine and wildflowers and possibility. You ever regret it? Leora asked, watching birds circle overhead. Helping me that day? Every time you argue with me about how to stack firewood properly, Rowan said, his tone deadpan. She elbowed him in the ribs. I'm being serious. So am I. You're terrible at stacking firewood. It's a genuine problem. Rowan? But no. His voice softened. Never regretted it. Not even close. Not for a single second. Even when I almost got you killed? Multiple times? Even then. Because the alternative was spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been if I'd been brave enough to take a chance on something uncertain. He turned to face her fully. You gave me a reason to stop hiding from life. To start living again instead of just marking time until I died. How could I ever regret that? Leora felt tears prickle her eyes, the good kind that came from overwhelming emotion rather than pain. I love you, you know, in case I haven't said it clearly enough. You haven't, actually, but I figured it out anyway. He pulled her close, and she felt his smile against her hair. I love you too. Even when you stack firewood wrong and argue about everything and make my life infinitely more complicated than it needs to be. I don't stack it wrong. He kissed her, cutting off the argument, and she melted into him with a laugh that was half sob. When they broke apart, the future stretched before them, uncertain, challenging, probably full of difficulties they couldn't yet imagine, but theirs to shape however they chose. That evening, as they sat on the completed porch watching another spectacular sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, Marcus and William rode up with news. The territorial governor had officially declared Coldwater Ridge a recognized township, complete with all the protections and support that entailed. The town that had almost given Leora to a mob was now an official community, stronger for having faced its fears and come out the other side. "They want you both on the town council," Marcus announced, grinning like he'd just delivered the best news in the world. "Figure you've more than earned a say in how things are run around here." Leora looked at Rowan, saw her own surprise reflected in his expression. "I don't know anything about running a town or making policy or any of that." "Neither do we. We'll learn together, make mistakes together, figure it out as we go." Marcus's grin widened. "Besides, after what you two did, standing up to Mercer, organizing the defense, keeping everyone focused when things look darkest, people trust you. They listen when you talk. That matters more than experience ever could." After they left, Leora sat in silence for a long time, processing what had just been offered. A year ago, she'd been running for her life, convinced she'd die alone and unmissed. Now she had a home, a partner, a community that wanted her voice in shaping its future. "It's real, isn't it?" she said quietly, almost afraid to believe it. "This life we're building, it's actually real." "It's real," Rowan confirmed, taking her hand. "Scary as hell, probably going to be messy and complicated, definitely going to challenge us in ways we can't predict. But real, solid, ours. I'm still not entirely sure I know how to do this. How to stay in one place, be part of something, trust that it won't all fall apart. Neither am I, honestly, but we'll figure it out." He squeezed her hand. "One day at a time, trying not to die, building something worth keeping." Leora laughed at the echo of his old philosophy, the simple wisdom that had kept them both alive. "That's still your entire approach to life?" "It's kept us alive so far. Seems foolish to mess with success." She couldn't argue with that logic. And as darkness fell and the stars emerged in their thousands, Leora let herself imagine the years ahead with something approaching genuine hope. Spring planting and summer harvests. Winter storms weathered together by the fire. The slow, steady accumulation of shared memories, shared struggles, shared triumphs. The town council meetings would probably drive her crazy. The responsibility of helping guide a community would be terrifying. There would be disagreements and difficulties and days when running seemed infinitely more appealing than staying, but there would also be mornings waking up beside Rowan. Evenings spent building and creating. The satisfaction of watching things grow that she'd planted with her own hands. The profound comfort of belonging somewhere, of having people who knew her name and cared whether she lived or died. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth having ever was. But it would be theirs, built deliberately, defended fiercely, treasured for the miracle it represented. She'd come to this harsh frontier town as a wounded stranger running from her past, expecting only to pass through unnoticed and unmourned. Instead, she'd found something she'd stopped believing existed. A future worth fighting for, a home worth defending, a love worth every terrifying risk. And if that wasn't survival redefined, transformed into something greater than mere existence, Leora didn't know what was. As they headed inside for the night, Rowan paused at the door, looking back at the land they'd defended, the home they'd built, the life they'd chosen. "You know what tomorrow is?" he asked. "What?" "First official town council meeting. We're actually doing this. Being responsible members of society." His eyes twinkled with amusement. "Terrifying thought." "Absolutely terrifying." Leora grinned back at him. "Can't wait." Neither could she. And that simple truth, that genuine anticipation for tomorrow, told her everything she needed to know about how far she'd come. From running toward nowhere to running toward something. From surviving alone to living together. From a stranger at the edge of death to a woman with roots, with purpose, with a reason to stay. The frontier was still harsh. The world was still dangerous. Tomorrow would undoubtedly bring its own challenges and fears and difficulties. But tonight, in the cabin they'd built from hope and stubbornness and sheer refusal to give up, Leora Vance was finally, impossibly, home. And that made every battle, every risk, every terrifying moment of trust absolutely worth it. The story that had begun with blood in the snow and a stranger's unexpected mercy had become something neither of them could have imagined. A testament to the transformative power of choosing to stand, to fight, to build something stronger than fear. They had survived the violence and the hatred and the fear. More than that, they had learned how to live, how to trust, how to transform survival into something that looked suspiciously like happiness. And in a harsh frontier world that tried its best to break people into pieces, that was the greatest victory imaginable. Sonnet 4.5.